Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this What If story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by AleahLRB on Wattpad. Now let's start. It looked so foreboding and now it featured Tenko. Izuku posed proudly on the dining room chair like All Might, exclaiming that he wanted to be a hero. The only reactions from the others present were wide eyes and pauses. His father asked what he was wearing, and Izuku proudly explained that it was an All Might costume he made himself, complete with paper shapes resembling the patterns on All Might's Golden Age costume and tufts of paper stuck to the hood to mimic the hero's hairstyle. Tenko, Izuku's older brother, glanced at their father, who was visibly trying to maintain a neutral expression. Hisashi squeezed the spoon he held, fighting the urge to show displeasure. Instead, he smiled at his youngest son, affirming that he liked the costume. Izuku gazed out the window, watching the neighborhoods pass by with an excited expression. He couldn't wait to get to UA, a dream he had cherished since childhood. Being in the recommendations made it even more thrilling. A man in his late 30s, dressed in a chauffeur's uniform with light blue skin and pointy ears, addressed him as Izuku. Confused for a moment, Izuku covered his mouth, mumbling again. The chauffeur giggled, asking if he was nervous. Izuku chuckled, scratching the back of his head, and expressed his excitement about finally attending UA. As the car slowed and stopped in front of the gates of UA, Izuku's eyes sparkled at the sight. He quickly exited the car, nodding at the chauffeur without looking back as he mentioned the pickup time. Taking a deep breath, Izuku stepped into his dream school, his green eyes shimmering with hope. He thought about how his father and brother would tease him for wanting to be a hero, but they had always been supportive despite their own views on heroes. He recalled the rules he had set for himself, particularly the one about using only the quirks he had chosen for school. It was like picking clothes that reflected who he was. Having been homeschooled since his quirk manifested, he had limited interaction with others outside his family and their servants. He had learned an important lesson the hard way during his limited time with others. He needed to practice the combination of quirks he had prepared for the recommendations entrance exam, ensuring they felt natural to him. He thought about the combination of air cannon, impact recoil, muscle augmentation, and fortify, which would create a powerful effect in battle. Lost in his thoughts, Izuku took a wrong step and felt himself falling. He closed his eyes, bracing for impact, but it never came. Opening his eyes, he discovered he was floating just above the ground. A brown-haired girl with a round face was casting a shadow over him. She took his hand and helped him stand upright, instructing him to release. He landed on his feet and thanked her. She smiled brightly, mentioning it was bad luck to fall on the first day, and he felt a warmth from her kindness. A tall boy with her began to lecture Izuku about watching where he was going. Izuku listened, chuckling nervously and scratching the back of his head. The tall boy wished him good luck at general studies, and Izuku winced but didn't correct him. After they left, Izuku realized he hadn't learned the girl's name. Deducing from their appearance that they might be in hero studies, he noted the tall boy resembled the hero 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸, likely making him an 𝗍𝐻. Sighing, Izuku made his way to his room, noting the large door, which was expected given that some students had mutant quirks that made them much larger than average. He took a deep breath and opened the door, entering just after the round girl and tall boy, who were still chatting with their new classmates. The girl recognized him and exclaimed that he was the boy from earlier, surprised to see him in hero studies. Izuku laughed it off, unsure if it was a compliment or an insult. He introduced himself, bowing slightly, and the girl introduced herself as 𝐼𝐻𝐸 𝐬, with the boy being Tenya 𝗍𝐻. Izuku confirmed his suspicion about 𝗍𝐻. Suddenly, a thud caught his attention. A man who looked like he hadn't slept in days emerged from a yellow sleeping bag, startling 𝐼𝐻𝐸. Izuku watched as the man approached them, familiar in appearance. He introduced himself as 𝐼𝐻𝐸, their homeroom teacher, and Izuku quickly understood the message, moving to the nearest empty seat. Izuku was instructed to change into his PE uniform and meet at the PE grounds. Their new homeroom teacher seemed familiar, but Izuku couldn't quite place him. His classmate with spiky red hair repeated the teacher's words about the quirk apprehension test. The teacher explained that unlike in middle school, where quirks were prohibited during PE, they could now use their quirks as high school students in UA's hero studies. The mention of using quirks excited the class, but Izuku felt a knot in his stomach at the thought of showcasing his abilities in front of everyone. He recalled a memory of a blonde boy from years ago. The teacher warned the class not to get too excited, and the atmosphere shifted. When the teacher mentioned 𝐾𝐿, Izuku flinched. He hadn't heard that name in a long time. The teacher then instructed 𝐾𝐿 to demonstrate his quirk by pitching a ball. The boy with blonde hair and a fierce expression stepped forward, and Izuku's heart sank. It was him, the boy from the park who had threatened him after he had shown off his quirks. 𝐾𝐿 walked to the stone base, lifted the ball, and with a fierce shout, threw it with explosive force. Izuku recognized him instantly, recalling the harsh words that had haunted him. As 𝐾𝐿 returned to the class, their eyes met for a brief moment, and Izuku winced. The teacher concluded his speech with a stern warning about expectations and the consequences of not meeting them. Izuku felt the weight of those words. He didn't want to risk showing all 4 of his quirks and getting expelled. He decided to play it safe and aim for the minimum. The tests that followed reminded Izuku of his training sessions with his father and the trainers he had worked with. They were challenging, but he intentionally held back, determined to avoid expulsion. Finally, it was Izuku's turn to pitch the ball. He watched as his classmates performed impressively, with 𝐼𝐼𝐿 achieving an infinite score. As he approached the stone base, he thought about using only his air cannon. He just needed to get by, no need to show off. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to throw. He felt the tension in his arm as he gathered the necessary power. When he released the ball, it landed only a few meters away, far short of his expectations. Confused, he wondered why it hadn't gone further. The teacher, seemingly reading his thoughts, revealed that he had erased Izuku's quirk. Izuku turned to see the teacher's eyes glowing crimson, his hair and scarf floating in the air. It was 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐃, the erasing hero. As the teacher called his name, Izuku tensed. He straightened up, acknowledging him. The teacher recognized him as one of the students who had passed through recommendations, prompting murmurs from the class. The teacher questioned why Izuku had not given his all during the tests, and Izuku struggled to find an answer. The teacher emphasized the importance of commitment to becoming a hero, insisting that half-hearted efforts would not be tolerated. He instructed Izuku to try again, warning that he would be expelled if he did not put forth his best effort. With a sigh, Izuku accepted the new ball handed to him. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing. When he opened them, the teacher noticed a spark of determination in his gaze, a look reminiscent of children who first discover their quirks, a look that many lose over time. Unexpectedly, Izuku's arm began to swell and twist, ripping the sleeve of his PE uniform as his muscles expanded. The class murmured in surprise. He wound up for the throw, and as he released the ball, the force created a sonic boom, causing the ground to tremble and dust to fly. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching from the shadows, their jaw dropping in disbelief at the sight. When the dust settled, Izuku looked at the teacher, waiting for the result with a proud and content smile that radiated joy. Aizawa couldn't help but flash a sick but proud smile of his own as he announced the boy's score, infinite. Izuku looked at the PE shirt in his hand and sighed. In his excitement, he had forgotten about his uniform, resulting in a torn sleeve. He placed the shirt in his locker and grabbed his regular uniform. Tenya Ida approached him, bowing slightly as he began to apologize. He expressed regret for his earlier assumptions about Izuku being a general studies student, acknowledging that Izuku was more skilled than anyone else there. Izuku was a bit surprised but felt satisfied with the apology. He reassured Ida that it was all right, mentioning how his brother often teased him about his plain appearance compared to their father. He wanted to spare his classmate any further embarrassment. Ida stood straight, forcing a smile at Izuku's response. Their spiky red-haired classmate then draped an arm around Izuku, surprising him slightly, and asked about his quirk. Izuku explained that it was called Power Limb, allowing him to use various levels of strength in his arms and legs. Their classmate with the tape quirk commented that with a quirk like that, It was no surprise Izuku had been accepted through recommendations. Izuku added that his father had him training since his quirk manifested, providing him with plenty of practice, even if his family wasn't particularly fond of heroes. Ida inquired why his family felt that way, and Izuku attempted to clarify that it wasn't a dislike for heroes, but rather a concern about the moral dilemmas involved in the profession. His explanation seemed to leave his classmates more confused. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted them. A blond boy stormed toward Izuku, pushing past others in his way. When he was just a meter away, he called out to Izuku, using the nickname that had haunted him in the past. Izuku flinched at the name, and the boy continued, challenging him and taunting him about his perceived weakness. With each explosive outburst, Izuku felt the tension rise, but he stood his ground even as he took a step back. Just then, Aizawa entered the locker room, commanding attention. He prohibited the blond boy from fighting Izuku, especially outside of class activities, and instructed everyone to change back into their uniforms and head to their next class. As Izuku made his way out of the gate, his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket to see his brother calling. He greeted Tenko, who expressed his frustration about being abroad, making Izuku chuckle. Tenko asked about Izuku's first day, teasing him about not letting his classmates win just because they were weaker. Izuku hesitated, admitting that he had been cautious around Bakugo, the boy who had challenged him. The conversation turned serious when Tenko reminded Izuku not to let Bakugo get to him, assuring him of his strength. After a brief pause, Izuku changed the subject, commenting on Tenko's voice, which sounded rough. Tenko promised to take care of it and reassured Izuku that their father would be home soon. Izuku felt a pang of longing, wishing he could see and hug him again. As their conversation ended, Izuku spotted Achiko and Ida approaching. He greeted them, and Achiko invited him to walk home with them. Izuku declined, mentioning that their chauffeur would be arriving soon. Just then, a car pulled up, and the chauffeur stepped out to open the door for Izuku, noticing his friends. The chauffeur inquired if Izuku had made friends, prompting Achiko to comment on his wealth. Izuku felt a bit embarrassed but offered his friends a ride, which they accepted. Meanwhile, Toshinori, in his true form, watched from a distance as Izuku and his friends got into the car and drove away. He furrowed his brow, realizing that all for one's son was 𝐒𝐮𝐬. He shook off his fears, reminding himself that he had no proof of any connection. The boy didn't resemble the man, and his quirk might simply be a muscle-enhancing ability. Toshinori covered his mouth, feeling blood seep through his fingers. Anger surged within him as he thought about the man who had caused him so much suffering. But he softened at the thought that the man was dead. He resolved to investigate the boy further, determined to uncover the truth about his lineage. If he is 𝐒𝐮𝐬, he might be acting as a spy, an infiltrator. If he is looking for a way to avenge his father, then that is something that must be prevented. Toshinori wishes he is wrong, that the boy isn't all for one's son, because if he is, then he took his father away from him. The sound of one person eating was the only noise in the large dining room, accompanied by an overwhelming silence. Izuku placed his bowl down and gulped some water. His father initiated a conversation, asking how school was. Izuku chuckled, sharing that he had met Bakugo again, who was in his class and had excelled in the entrance exam. He mentioned that Bakugo had taken down a 0-pointer and earned significant rescue points for saving a girl named Achiko. He proudly noted that Achiko and Tenya Ida had become his new friends at school. His father responded with a simple comment, and Izuku's smile faded. He looked directly at the laptop camera. Concerned, his father asked what was wrong. Izuku's eyes filled with tears as he expressed how much he missed him after 6 long years. His father reassured him that he would be home soon, but Izuku, frustrated, reminded him that he had been saying that for 5 years. He just wanted to be together again with his father and Tenko. After a moment, Hisashi promised he would be home within the year, which brought a glimmer of hope to Izuku. He wiped his tears and apologized for his outburst, to which Hisashi replied that it was okay. Just then, one of the maids entered with dessert, placing a bowl in front of Izuku and taking away the empty china. The students of Class 1A looked up in curiosity when someone announced their entrance. A tall, well-built blonde with sharp features entered the room, and the class erupted in excitement, recognizing All Might. Izuku beamed with joy, ecstatic to see his idol after 5 years. He instinctively approached All Might, holding out his quirk analysis journal and asking for a signature. The class fell silent for a moment before laughter erupted, and Izuku blushed, overwhelmed with excitement. All Might asked to see the journal, and the class quieted down again. As he flipped through the pages, he noted the thorough analyses of various heroes and their quirks, including their strengths and weaknesses. Toshinori felt a shiver run down his spine but maintained his iconic smile. Finally, he reached a blank page and signed it, handing it back to Izuku, who beamed with joy as if receiving a special birthday gift. His enthusiasm was genuine, and Toshinori felt a pang of guilt for the boys. Happiness. All Might announced that he would be teaching the Foundational Hero Studies class, a unique subject within Hero Studies. He instructed the students to wear their hero outfits, and Izuku felt a rush of excitement. He had been designing his outfit since he was 5, adjusting it based on the quirk combinations he had thought of and what his father had taught him. He had many drafts, some of which his father had disapproved of, including a light green costume that Hisashi suggested changing to a darker hue. Achiko called out to him, commenting on his outfit and saying it looked like a bunny, which hurt Izuku a little. He recalled the first time he had shown his design to Tenko, who had laughed and mistaken the tufts for bunny ears. Snapped out of his flashback by Achiko's voice, Izuku nervously corrected her, explaining that the design was meant to resemble All Might's hairstyle. All Might then gathered the class, explaining the setup for their first Foundational Hero Studies class, which would involve a battle trial. The students would be grouped into pairs through a lottery, except for one group that would have 3 members due to a particular student being expelled the previous day. The battles would take place indoors, as that was the most common scenario for heroes and villains. Izuku found himself paired with Eijiro Kirishima as the hero team, facing off against Momo Yaoyorozu and Fumikage Tokoyami. They're going first. Izuku didn't wait to start formulating a battle plan. The villain team had the advantage. With Yaoyorozu's creation quirk, she could easily set traps around the building or create various weapons to guard the nuke. Tokoyami's Dark Shadow could serve as both offense and defense, and if Izuku was correct, it would be stronger in the dark. If they blocked every window and turned off the lights, Tokoyami would be in his ideal habitat. Izuku noticed Kirishima looking confused and concerned. Realizing he had been mumbling, he quickly apologized, explaining it was a habit he picked up from his dad. Kirishima encouraged him to share his battle strategy. Izuku explained that the villains had a significant advantage due to Yaoyorozu's quirk, which was best kept behind the lines. He noted that their quirks were more suited for close combat, which wasn't ideal for the current situation. He hesitated, realizing he might have unintentionally insulted Kirishima's quirk, and tried to clarify. Suddenly, the announcement for the indoor battle trial commenced, signaling it was time for the heroes to storm the building. Izuku felt a pang of regret for not being able to share his plan with Kirishima and for his earlier comments. He took a deep breath, pushing aside his thoughts. They were in a battle now, and he needed to focus. As they ascended the stairs, Izuku warned Kirishima about the likelihood of Tokoyami being sent out. He instructed Kirishima to look for Yaoyorozu if they were attacked, emphasizing that the winner would be the one who could outlast the other. He grinned, recognizing that Kirishima's quirk was well suited for the situation. Kirishima's eyes widened as Dark Shadow attacked. Using his body as a shield, he absorbed the blow, and both boys took a few steps back to reassess. At the end of the hallway stood Tokoyami. Izuku yelled for Kirishima to stick to the plan as he charged toward Fumikage, while Kirishima took a different route. Izuku prepared to punch Fumikage but quickly retreated as Dark Shadow surrounded him. He realized he needed to put in more effort to subdue both of them. Activating his muscle augmentation and fortify, he glared at Fumikage, who readied himself as Dark Shadow floated between them. Izuku sprinted toward his opponent, and Dark Shadow charged with the intent to attack. However, both Tokoyami and Dark Shadow were surprised when Izuku's force sent Dark Shadow flying back. In that moment, Izuku leaped into the air, his arms swelling and twisting as he prepared to strike. He mouthed an apology before unleashing a punch that sent both Tokoyami and the wall behind them crashing down. Toshinori watched in concern as Tokoyami lay unconscious amid the rubble. Izuku approached his classmate, calmly wrapping capture tape around his hands before sprinting back into the building. Toshinori felt a chill. The way Izuku had approached Tokoyami after the attack was unsettling. It was a demeanor that seemed more fitting for a villain than a hero. Toshinori's thoughts drifted back to a past encounter, recalling the first time he had seen the arm that had caused him so much pain. He was pulled back to the present when a student announced that Midoriya and Kirishima had won. All Might declared the hero team victorious. Medics rushed in to take Tokoyami to the clinic while Yaoyorozu, Kirishima, and Midoriya headed to the observation room where the rest of the class had been watching. Compliments poured in for the students, particularly for Midoriya. All Might gathered the class's attention, asking who they thought the MVP of the match was. After a moment of silence, one student spoke up, crediting Yaoyorozu for her strategic planning and defense. While Midoriya had performed impressively, the damage he caused to the building was noted. As the class prepared for the next battle, Midoriya expressed his longing to check on Tokoyami in the clinic, feeling guilty for having knocked him unconscious. Toshinori recognized the sincerity in Midoriya's eyes and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, acknowledging his concern for his fellow hero in training. That is a characteristic a hero should have. Toshinori watched as the boy in green sprinted out. Unbeknownst to them, a heterochromic figure had been watching the green-haired boy ever since the recommendations exam. The liquid swirled as Tenko set the glass down. He wiped his lips with a paper napkin and grimaced at the newspaper. That man. That cursed man. Tenko's frustration boiled over as he pounded on the counter, his emotions erupting. The other patron in the bar regarded him with glowing yellow eyes. In All Might, Tenko thought. He ruined their family, made his brother cry, and dared to teach Izuku. The other person observed as Tenko crumpled the newspaper and disintegrated it with his quirk, his voice coarse with anger. Kurojiiri took a different glass and wiped it clean with a rag. It was no secret that Tenko despised All Might and wished for his downfall. It had always been part of his and his father's plan, but it became personal after the battle between Hisashi and All Might 6 years ago. Because of All Might, Hisashi could no longer come home to Izuku. They couldn't let Izuku see him, not after what All Might had done. Tenko knew he would eventually have to leave Izuku to become Hisashi's successor. He understood it would hurt his little brother, but he had always thought their father would still be with them. He was wrong. All Might had taken Hisashi away from Izuku. In every phone call, Tenko could hear the sadness in his brother's voice, how much he missed them. All Might was supposed to inspire happiness in those who looked up to him, but what had he done? He made Izuku cry, and that was unforgivable. In a surge of emotions, Tenko grabbed the glass he had just used and hurled it against the wall, watching it shatter into tiny shards. Kurojiiri, witnessing the outburst, remained silent as Tenko stood up, pushing his chair back with a screech. It was time. A portal opened, and Tenko stepped through, emerging at the front gates of UA. Then it was settled. Izuku. Midoriya as the president and Momo Yaoyorozu as the vice president. Aizawa-sensei's words echoed in Izuku's mind. How had he even received the role? Did he truly deserve it? Izuku's classmate, Tenya, noticed his distraction and asked if something was bothering him. Izuku admitted he felt unworthy of the president position, believing it should go to someone like Tenya instead. Since the battle trials, Izuku had struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He had apologized to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 countless times, but the guilt lingered. He had only acted to win, to subdue his opponent, which was what heroes did. Yet, he felt dirty, as if he didn't deserve the victory. Shudo Todoroki, who had been quietly eating with them, suddenly spoke up, asserting that Izuku did deserve the position. His classmates were taken aback. It was unusual for Shudo to join in. He continued, stating that Izuku had proven himself during the quirk apprehension test and the battle trial, and everyone at the table awkwardly nodded in agreement. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the cafeteria, announcing that UA's grounds had been breached and urging everyone to evacuate calmly. Izuku, Tenya, Achiko, and Shudo attempted to escape, but they were quickly overwhelmed and separated by the throng of panicked students. Tenya called out for his friends, while Achiko, trapped among the crowd, responded from somewhere in the middle. Izuku, feeling the pressure of the situation, collided with a glass wall, causing a trickle of blood to flow from his forehead. He opened his eyes to see a group of media personnel outside, the source of the chaos. Frustration surged within him as he struggled to raise his arms. Activating his quirks, he clapped his swollen arms together, creating a shockwave that shattered the glass and caught the attention of the students, allowing them to escape. Blood continued to trickle down from Izuku's forehead as he expressed his frustration to his fellow students. He chastised them for panicking, reminding them that they were training to be heroes and should act with composure. His voice rang out clear and strong, surprising his classmates. Shoyuta, Toshinori, Hisashi, and Nedzu frowned at the sight of Yue's gates, which were completely destroyed. Shoyuta grimaced, cursing the media for causing such chaos. A few students had been injured during the panic, including Midoriya. "We'll have to strengthen security," Shoyuta commented. "It's already being addressed," Nedzu replied, maintaining a serious demeanor. "But what about the person with the disintegrating quirk?" Shoyuta inquired. "The police are on it," Toshinori answered. Shoyuta expressed his unease, sharing his bad feeling about the situation. The other teachers exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to make of his concerns. No one would dare attack Yue's walls, especially with All Might working here. The media may be bold, but they wouldn't vandalize Yue. Shuda's words created a tense atmosphere, leaving everyone silent for a moment. "But that Midoriya kid handled the situation well, didn't he?" Hisashi remarked, attempting to shift the topic. "He's your student, right, Shoyuta?" Shoyuta confirmed with a nod. "A little too intense, perhaps due to the adrenaline and seeing his own blood," Hisashi added, noting the unusual reaction. Something in Hisashi's words stirred an uneasy feeling in Toshinori. Izuku took a deep breath, patting the spot on his forehead where he had been injured. Recovery Girl's quirk was remarkable. It felt as if he had never been hurt. She assured him it wasn't serious, and he felt grateful for her help, with or without her healing abilities. The quiet of the room was abruptly interrupted by the sound of Izuku's phone. Seeing it was Tenko, Izuku answered. His brother's voice came through the phone, loud and urgent, prompting Izuku to distance the device from his ear. To avoid any discomfort, he switched to loudspeaker. Tenko demanded to know what had happened, clearly worried. Izuku explained that during a chaotic incident at school, the media had breached the gates, triggering alarms. In the ensuing panic, he had been pushed against a window, hitting his head. However, he reassured Tenko that Recovery Girl had already healed the injury. Izuku anticipated a reaction, but silence filled the line. He called out to Tenko, growing increasingly concerned. Eventually, Tenko's voice came through, softer than usual, expressing his sorrow. Confused, Izuku tried to downplay the situation, insisting it was just a minor injury. Yet, the lack of response from Tenko made him uneasy. When the call unexpectedly ended, Izuku wondered if he had said something wrong. Before he could contemplate calling back, his friends burst into the clinic, rushing to his side with concern. They expressed their relief that he was okay, though Tenya chastised him for the risky move that led to the injury. Izuku reassured them that Recovery Girl had taken care of everything, and they relaxed. However, their relief was short-lived when Izuku's phone rang again. It was his father. Tenya informed him that they would step outside while he took the call. Izuku answered, placing the call on loudspeaker. His father asked about his well-being and offered to have their family doctor check on him. Izuku chuckled, confirming he was fine. Hisashi's voice conveyed genuine relief, and he inquired if Izuku's friends were present. After confirming it was okay, Izuku invited Tenya, Achiko, and Shudo back into the conversation. They introduced themselves, and Hisashi expressed his gratitude for their friendship with Izuku. He admitted he had worried about Izuku being a social outcast due to his homeschooling. Achiko assured Hisashi that Izuku was a wonderful friend, and the conversation continued with light-hearted exchanges. Eventually, Hisashi had to leave, and Izuku felt a warm smile spread across his face at the sound of his father's happiness. After the call ended, Achiko complimented Izuku's dad, and he shared that his father would be returning home after 6 years abroad. Curious, 𝗏𝗏 asked why he had been away. Izuku explained that his father had to handle job matters when he was younger, but they had kept in touch regularly. His friends exchanged concerned glances but chose to mirror Izuku's happiness. They were glad to see him so content. Later, 𝗏𝗏 reflected on Izuku's background, realizing he had been trained from a young age, unlike himself. Anger surged within him as he thought about the hardships he had endured, contrasting them with Izuku's experiences. He couldn't understand why Izuku's father could be supportive while his own had not been. A sudden ringing jolted Izuku from sleep. Blinking away the remnants of slumber, he reached for his phone, accepting the call without checking the caller ID. It was Tenko, who asked if Izuku could meet someone for him that day. Despite Izuku's reluctance due to special classes, Tenko insisted it was important. After some back and forth, Izuku reluctantly agreed, but only if Tenko promised to visit home soon. Tenko accepted the condition, and after a brief exchange, hung up. Izuku sighed, determined not to miss his class, and headed to take a shower. As he stepped outside to the car, the chauffeur, 𝗟𝗏𝗏, noticed Izuku's school uniform and expressed confusion. Izuku quickly requested that 𝗟𝗏𝗏 not inform Tenko about his plans to attend school that day. "Can you go get his package for me instead?" Izuku asked the chauffeur, who was taken aback by the request. "Mr. Izuku, your brother already asked me to accompany you. He's expecting you there," the chauffeur replied. Izuku insisted that they had a special class that day and he didn't want to miss it. He winked at the chauffeur, suggesting that Tenko wouldn't know he hadn't gone if no one told him. 𝗟𝗏𝗏 drove Izuku to UA, watching as the green-haired boy ran while waving back at him. After a few minutes, he stopped to make a phone call. 𝗟𝗏𝗏 knew what he had done and understood this wouldn't end well if his 𝗏𝗏 didn't learn of it sooner. He rang Tenko's phone multiple times, but no one answered. The phone was left on a coffee table in the empty bar. After several attempts, 𝗟𝗏𝗏 sent a message stating that Mr. Izuku insisted on going to school and he couldn't stop him. Once it was sent, 𝗟𝗏𝗏 drove off. Izuku took a deep breath and exhaled, hoping that 𝗟𝗏𝗏 wouldn't tell on him. But even if he did, Tenko would understand, right? What if he didn't? Izuku began to mumble, catching the attention of half the bus. 𝗏𝗏 placed a hand on his classmate's shoulder, snapping Izuku out of his thoughts. He apologized, wondering if he had bothered them. "No, not really," Momo replied. "Is something wrong?" Achiko asked. Izuku hesitated but eventually decided to share. He explained that his brother had specifically asked him to run an errand that morning, but he had given the task to someone else so he could attend school. He worried that if Tenko found out he might feel bad, especially since he had been ignoring Izuku's texts and calls for a few days. Izuku feared he might have upset him. "Do you have any idea why he would be upset with you?" Tenya asked, looking at Izuku in confusion. Izuku thought about it, recalling that when he and his brother had misunderstandings, they usually talked it out. Maybe if he knew what made Tenko upset, he could address it the next time they spoke. Izuku nodded, still contemplating. "I think I get it," he said. "But I don't know what the problem is. He just started ignoring me after the incident when I got injured." Izuku explained. "Maybe he just feels bad that he wasn't there to support you," 𝗏𝗏 suggested. The others looked at him in surprise. "If I had a younger sibling who got hurt and I couldn't be there to take care of them, I would feel guilty," 𝗏𝗏 elaborated. Izuku's face brightened as if he had found his answer. "Yeah, I remember him saying sorry when he called. Maybe that's it. Thank you, 𝗏𝗏. I'll try to talk to him about it." Then the bus stopped, and they had arrived. One by one, the students got off the bus. Izuku pulled the hood of his costume up and clicked the mouthpiece in place before following the others out. Outside, they were greeted by the space hero, 13, who led the class inside. Curiously, 𝗟𝗏𝗏, who was supposed to be with them, was nowhere to be seen. Izuku had overheard the two teachers discussing how he had gotten sidetracked on the way back to UA, which he understood, but he felt slightly disappointed since 𝗟𝗏𝗏 was the reason he wanted to attend this class. As they entered the facility, they could see almost the entire area, from the conflagration and mountain zones at the back to the ruins zone just to their left. 13 explained the importance and principles of rescue training, and everyone listened attentively. Then, out of the corner of Izuku's eye, he noticed a disturbance in the plaza that caught his attention. Aizawa-sensei seemed to have noticed it too and was already looking in that direction. Before long, the rest of the class noticed as well, their attention drawn to the black fog that had appeared. Was this part of the class? From the black fog emerged a man with messy light blue hair, hands covering his body and face. The fog expanded, revealing villains. Wait, is this part of the class? The yellow-haired boy with the quirk of electrification asked. No, Aizawa-sensei responded, holding his capture scarf, which was responding and tensing. After putting his goggles over his eyes, he told 13 that he would hold them off and instructed her to take care of the kids. Aizawa, you can't handle them all. 13 yelled, but it was too late. Aizawa had already begun to confront the villains. We need to leave, 13 told the students, and they all headed toward the entrance, but they stopped in their tracks as more black fog appeared. Curious. The schedule we acquired said that All Might would be here. Where is he? The black fog spoke, causing the entire class to tense. 13 pointed her hands toward the black fog, her gloves opening to absorb it. Tenya, while he's occupied, go get the other teachers. My calls won't go out. We have no contact. 13 urged her student with urgency. But I can't just leave my classmates. Tenya protested. Tenya, you're the fastest one in your class. I need you to get reinforcements, 13 insisted. The students' eyes widened as more black fog appeared behind their teacher, and she was suddenly engulfed by it. Someone from their class screamed, and they were all shocked. You didn't think I could open a portal behind you? The black fog taunted, a smug expression evident. Izuku gritted his teeth. Without thinking, he activated a few strength quirks in his arm and jumped toward the black fog, ready to strike. I don't think so, the black fog replied, and Izuku was suddenly surrounded by darkness, hearing his classmates scream. Before he could react, he found himself falling. He quickly maneuvered and landed safely. Looking around, he realized he was in the landslide area of USJ, alone except for a number of villains. He had been separated from his classmates. Izuku took a fighting stance, preparing for what was to come. Shota then observed the two villains who had yet to attack. They stood silently watching. The man with hands covering his body had mentioned something earlier about eliminating All Might, raising the question of their true intentions. But how could they possibly succeed? If their plan was to send these weaker opponents against him, it was foolish. They stood no chance against the #1 hero. What gave them the confidence to think they could defeat him? Shota's gaze shifted to the muscular black figure, a true enigma. The alarms and communications were down, indicating someone was jamming them. He recalled the screams from the entrance when the fog villain vanished, causing his stomach to churn. Still, 13 was with his students. He could trust her to keep them safe. Shota grunted as he tossed aside the last of the lower-ranked villains, breathing from the exertion. He wasn't accustomed to frontline combat. The villain with the hands spoke again, casually leaning back. He had his hands tucked in his pockets, staring off into the distance. He introduced himself as 𝐒𝐮𝐬, the Erasure hero, and demanded to know where All Might was, claiming the hero had done something wrong and needed to be punished. Shota frowned, challenging the villain to reveal his plan for killing All Might. The man chuckled and charged at him. Shota activated his quirk and sent his capture scarf toward the villain, who caught it and pulled Shota closer, a tug he didn't resist. Using the momentum, Shota attempted to punch the villain, but he caught Shota's hand instead. The villain glared at him, then began a countdown. Shota blinked, inadvertently deactivating his quirk. The villain commented on Shota's unique fighting style, catching him off guard. As Shota looked at his hand, he felt a cold sensation followed by a burning one. His hand was beginning to disintegrate. He tried to pull away, but the villain's grip was unyielding, revealing his surprising strength. Suddenly, a loud clap echoed from the direction of the landslide zone, startling the villain. Seizing the opportunity, Shota kicked the man away and stepped back, realizing he was responsible for the breach from days prior. The villain muttered about the clap, and then black fog materialized behind him. The man, still shaken by the sound, questioned the fog's presence, wondering why it wasn't preventing the students from escaping. The fog responded, apologizing and informing him that a student had escaped, with reinforcements on the way. This visibly frustrated the man named Shigaraki, who began scratching his neck aggressively. Shigaraki's anger escalated as he realized they were close to killing All Might but would have to settle for damaging 𝗟𝗻𝐻𝐸 instead. Shota's eyes widened as he understood the villain's intent, spotting two of his students, Uraraka and Azui. Before he could react, Shigaraki called out, "Nomu." In an instant, Shota was shoved to the ground, feeling a few bones crack. Looking up, he saw the black muscular villain towering over him. He activated his quirk but was met with a punch to the face from the villain. Shigaraki explained that Nomu was an artificial being created specifically to eliminate All Might and declared his intention to damage 𝗟𝗻𝐻𝐸. Just moments earlier, Azui and Uraraka had defeated their villains and were heading to the central plaza. Aizawa-sensei was finishing off the remaining villains. Izuku felt the effectiveness of his echolocation quirk as he checked that all nearby villains were unconscious. His task was complete. After activating muscle augmentation on his legs, he leaped over the wall surrounding the landslide zone. He decided to regroup with Azui and Uraraka before heading to Aizawa-sensei. After a brief run, he spotted his classmates by the shore. He raised his hand to greet them, but his expression shifted to shock as he saw the villain with hands covering his body reaching out to a terrified Uraraka. Fueled by emotion, Izuku activated several strength quirks in his arm, making it swell, and charged at the villain, shouting for him to back off. The shockwave from his punch disturbed the dirt around them, and he felt a hit, noticing his classmates moving away. As the dust settled, he realized his fist was against a different black figure. Looking up, he saw the beaked villain, wincing as he realized his attack had no effect. The black villain seized his arm, squeezing tightly. Izuku stifled a whimper as the grip intensified. He couldn't release muscle augmentation. It was his only defense against the creature's strength. The villain addressed him, expressing frustration that he was present. Izuku felt the intensity of the villain's anger, his eyes burning with fury. He bit his lip, determined not to cry in front of a villain. Uraraka's warning about the villain's quirk made Izuku tense, fear gripping him as he struggled to free his arm from Nomu's grasp. The villain reached out toward him, prompting Izuku to panic. He activated quirks in his other arm and threw a punch at the villain with light blue hair, but Nomu caught his hand again, leaving Izuku feeling helpless. Izuku felt a wave of fear wash over him, convinced he was facing his end. Suddenly, a booming voice broke through his despair. All Might had arrived, and relief flooded Izuku's heart, bringing tears to his eyes at the sight of his hero. Tamura, observing the boy, recognized the silent tears behind the mask. He felt a flicker of brotherly affection but knew he had a role to play. He commanded the Nomu to dispose of Izuku, and the monstrous creature complied, tossing him into the air. In a flash, All Might swooped in, catching Izuku and swiftly bringing him to safety with Azui and Uraraka. He instructed them to take Aizawa to the others at the entrance. The students nodded and hurried off, leaving All Might to face the three villains before him. Toshinori clenched his teeth, frustrated with himself for not being there to protect his students. The thought of Izuku in danger gnawed at him. He confronted the villains, feigning confidence as he asked if they intended to kill him. The masked villain responded coldly, accusing him of sins that warranted punishment. The villain gestured toward Nomu, revealing its purpose was to eliminate All Might. Toshinori winced but masked his reaction. The villain smirked, taunting him about his perceived weakness. The tension in the air thickened as the battle was about to commence. Meanwhile, Izuku and his classmates paused when they spotted Shudo rushing toward them. Concerned, Izuku asked if Shudo was okay. Shudo assured him he was fine but inquired about All Might's whereabouts. Achiko informed him that All Might was engaged in battle with the villains. Shudo expressed his worries, but Azui reassured them of All Might's strength, emphasizing the need to prioritize Aizawa's safety. They carried their injured teacher up the stairs, where they reunited with their remaining classmates. Izuku heard an explosion from the direction of the fight, realizing Bakugo had joined the fray. He felt a pang of frustration, wishing Momo were there to provide first aid supplies. His thoughts raced as he wondered about the other teachers and their safety. Taking a deep breath, Izuku activated his quirk, bird's eye view, allowing him to see the area from above. His heart lifted when he spotted the teachers just a short distance from the entrance. Excitedly, he shared the news with his classmates, who were momentarily confused until they noticed something dark flying away from the battle. The teachers, led by 𝗀𝐻, broke through the gates, prompting cheers from the students. The events that followed became a blur for Izuku. He recalled the teachers tending to Aizawa and 13, apprehending the unconscious villains, and gathering their classmates from various locations. However, the details eluded him. He remembered speaking with the police, recounting what he knew. He overheard that Nomu had been captured and that Tamura Shigaraki had been shot during their escape. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, reminding him of how close he had come to danger. Recovery Girl had ensured that all students were unharmed, and now they awaited their parents. Izuku's attention was drawn to a familiar car pulling up at the gates. 𝐼𝐻𝐼 had arrived. He bid farewell to his teachers and, still feeling exhausted, walked toward the car, unaware of the man with light blue hair emerging from the back seat. When the man called his name, Izuku recognized the voice immediately. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes as he confirmed it was his brother, Tenko. Overcome with emotion, he rushed into Tenko's embrace, allowing his tears to flow freely. He felt his brother's comforting hand in his hair, soothing his worries. Tenko reassured him that everything was all right and explained that he had rearranged his work schedule to spend time with Izuku after his recent ordeal. Izuku's eyes lit up with joy at the news. Just then, Hizashi-sensei approached, inquiring if he was Tenko, Izuku's older brother. Tenko's demeanor shifted, and he confronted Hizashi about the school's failure to protect the students from the villains. His anger drew the attention of those nearby. Hizashi attempted to calm Tenko, explaining that they had done everything possible and that the circumstances of the villains' infiltration were still under investigation. Tenko's words hung in the air, creating a tense atmosphere as Izuku tried to intervene, but his brother remained steadfast in his frustration. You had been hurt before because the press sought an exclusive on All Might. For years, no villain dared to attack UA, but the year All Might decided to teach, a villain struck. Who thought it was a good idea for All Might to take on a teaching role anyway? Could he even teach? The teachers were left in silence. Tenko informed Izuku that they were going home. As he took a step, his leg weakened, and he nearly fell. Izuku rushed to help his brother up. Tenko reassured him that he was fine, attributing his stumble to an accident at work. He stood straight and got into the car. Izuku bowed to the teachers, apologizing for his brother's behavior before joining Tenko in the vehicle, and they drove away. Tenko had his own reasons for acting out earlier, wanting to get back at the heroes after his failure. He rubbed his little brother's hair as Izuku slept, whispering an apology for his earlier outburst, admitting he hadn't expected Izuku to be there. He regretted the harsh words he had used but felt the need to maintain an appearance of strength. Struggling to stand, Tenko grabbed the drawer next to him for support, grimacing at the pain. He walked carefully, using solid objects for assistance until he reached his room. Sitting on his bed, he opened his laptop and accepted a video call from their father. The screen revealed his father's office. Tenko confirmed that Izuku was asleep after checking on him. He looked at his father, who bore scars on half of his face, a reminder of his past encounters with All Might. Tenko expressed his sorrow for failing his father and putting Izuku in danger, feeling he had let down both his team and his brother. An old man's voice echoed in the background, reminding Tenko of the Nomu they had lost, which only deepened his frown. His father reassured him that they hadn't expected All Might to still be so strong and advised Tenko to spend more time with Izuku, who had been stressed by recent events. He emphasized that Tenko's next mission wouldn't happen for a while. In a faculty meeting at UA, all staff were present except for Shoyuta and Anakuro, who were still at the hospital. Naomasa Tsukachi, a detective from the police force, reported on their investigation into the League of Villains. They had apprehended several villains who claimed they were approached by Tamura Shigaraki and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽, who offered them freedom in exchange for helping to eliminate All Might. However, no substantial information about the ringleaders was available, and the Nomu remained unresponsive. Nemuri, also known as Midnight, inquired about the meaning of the freedom offered by Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Naomasa explained that despite his unkempt appearance, Shigaraki had a way with words, convincing criminals to join his cause by portraying All Might as a hypocrite. He argued that All Might's existence condemned villainy while promoting heroism, suggesting that if All Might were to die, the villains could regain their freedom. Tashinori, in his true form, recalled Shigaraki mentioning something else during their confrontation. This piqued the interest of the others in the room. When asked what it was, Tashinori revealed that Shigaraki had claimed he had sinned against them. Confusion arose as Ken, also known as Cementos, questioned whether that was the same thing. Tashinori clarified that it felt personal, leading to a heavy silence. Nemuri asked if Tashinori had any idea what might have angered Shigaraki. Tashinori felt a twist in his stomach, realizing that Shigaraki and Kurogiri might be seeking revenge for their 𝗟𝗏𝗱. He worried about young Izuku, who had nearly died that day. If Shigaraki was indeed his father, they wouldn't harm him. It was just his trauma that made him fear the boy, who was merely an ordinary child with a quirk similar to one of his stolen abilities. Nemuri then shifted the conversation to another issue, mentioning that Tenko had snapped during Izuku's brother's visit to take him home. She revealed that Tenko had blamed Tashinori for what happened to Izuku. Tashinori winced at the news. Hisashi pointed out that Shoyuta had overheard Izuku mentioning that his brother and father disliked heroes, which might explain Tenko's harsh words. The room fell silent once more. Netsu suggested tightening security, especially for the upcoming sports festival. He took a sip of tea as his staff looked on, questioning whether they should proceed with the festival after the villain attack. Ectoplasm argued that they needed to show the League of Villains that UA stood strong despite their actions. Netsu asked for approval to continue with the festival, and everyone agreed. The next morning, Tenko burst into Izuku's room, excitedly waking him up with improvised cymbals and loud calls. Izuku jolted awake, startled by the noise, only to find Tenko laughing heartily. Tenko expressed how much he missed this playful interaction. Izuku, not amused, threw a pillow at his brother, who caught it and hugged it tightly. Tenko then encouraged Izuku to get up for breakfast, revealing that he had prepared his favorite meal. As he helped Izuku out of bed, Izuku noticed the comb keeping Tenko's bangs out of his face and teased him about it, questioning if he really expected to wear hair wax all the time. "Have you seen what it's done to my hair?" Tenko was playing with his hair as he spoke. Izuku laughed and got off his bed, noticing the bandage around his brother's calf, which was slightly stained red. He asked about Tenko's leg, concerned. Tenko brushed it off, saying it was just a work accident. Izuku insisted that Tenko needed to be careful and not push himself too hard, pointing out the bandages wrapped around his brother's fingers. Tenko smiled to reassure Izuku, but the smile did little to ease his brother's worry. Izuku chose not to pursue the topic further and walked with Tenko to the dining room, ensuring his older brother didn't lose his balance. For as long as Izuku could remember, Tenko had been quirkless. While their father trained Izuku, Tenko would sit and watch, smiling, but Izuku sensed a different emotion behind that smile. He often caught Tenko training alone, knowing his brother had to work twice as hard due to lacking what most of society possessed. Katsudon. Tenko's voice broke Izuku's thoughts as he slid a bowl and a glass of milk across the table and sat down. Izuku was puzzled by the milk, questioning when Tenko had ever served it to him. Tenko chuckled, reminding Izuku that he used to like it as a child. He emphasized the importance of drinking milk for strong bones, warning Izuku about the risks of using his quirks too recklessly. Izuku realized he had never mentioned using more strengthening quirks than he should. Tenko, however, had a brother's intuition and had read Recovery Girl's notes on Izuku's medical records. He reminded Izuku of the potential consequences of overusing his quirks, urging him to be more careful at school. Suddenly, Izuku stood up, pushing his chair back in alarm. He asked if he would still be going to UA. Tenko's expression shifted, and he looked away, causing Izuku's heart to sink. Tenko then revealed that their father had agreed to let Izuku stay, but with a serious warning that if Izuku got hurt due to the hero's failures, he would pull him out of UA, regardless of their wishes. Izuku felt a weight in his chest from his brother's words but was determined to enjoy his meal. Tenko insisted he eat his katsudon and drink his milk, even offering his own glass, which made Izuku chuckle. When Izuku entered Class 1A, he was immediately surrounded by his classmates. They expressed their relief that he was back, having worried about his brother's anger and the possibility of a transfer. Izuku explained that while their father insisted he could stay at UA, Tenko had made it clear that any further incidents would lead to a transfer. He shared how protective Tenko was, having taken on a parental role since their father had to leave for work. His classmates expressed concern for Tenko, and the atmosphere grew heavy. To lighten the mood, Denki suggested they talk about Tenko's quirk, but Izuku awkwardly revealed that Tenko was actually quirkless, which only made things more uncomfortable. Just then, Aizawa-sensei entered the room, looking disheveled. The students were surprised to see him in that state, and Denki couldn't help but joke about it. Aizawa reassured them that he was mostly healed thanks to Recovery Girl's quirk and announced that the sports festival would continue, giving them 2 weeks to train and showcase their abilities to hero agencies. Izuku felt a surge of determination. If he performed well at the sports festival, he would be one step closer to becoming a hero and helping his family. Achiko chimed in with enthusiasm about her own dreams, prompting Izuku to invite his friends over for a training sleepover at his house, where they had a training hall. They all expressed excitement about the idea. "What about your brother?" Achiko asked. Izuku assured them that it would be fine and that Tenko would be glad to have them over. He acknowledged that Tenko might have given a bad first impression but promised he was the friendliest person they would ever meet. Tenya inquired about when they should start, and Achiko suggested Friday to Sunday. They all agreed. At that moment, they noticed several schoolmates outside their classroom. Izuku asked what was going on, and he spotted Katsuki standing up from his seat and heading toward the door. Katsuki scoffed, claiming they had no chance against him and his friends, boasting about their victory over villains. Izuku thought to himself that such boasting was unnecessary. Katsuki ordered their classmates to move aside, and most complied, except for one student with dark purple hair who seemed to have been sleep-deprived. Katsuki growled again for him to move, and the student informed him that general studies students could transfer to hero studies if they performed well. He added that hero studies students could also be transferred to general studies if they underperformed. Katsuki raised an eyebrow at this, and the student smirked, suggesting it should be enough to humble him. Katsuki frowned and brushed past the student, giving him a light shove. The door slid open, revealing Toshinori, who looked at Katsuki as he entered. Toshinori welcomed him and asked him to take a seat. He expressed gratitude for Katsuki keeping his secret safe. Katsuki observed the man in front of him, noting how the yellow suit seemed too large for him. He was still taken aback by All Might's current appearance. Toshinori continued, mentioning that he had reviewed Katsuki's school records and noted his intelligence and heroism, particularly when he took down a 0-pointer during the entrance exam to save a girl. Katsuki winced at the memory, realizing it had been a coincidence. He had acted out of frustration rather than a longing to save anyone. Before Katsuki could explain himself, Toshinori revealed his intention to make Katsuki his successor. Katsuki was taken aback, unable to believe what he was hearing. Toshinori explained that his quirk, One for All, could be passed from one person to another. He shared that due to his injury, the time he could use his quirk had been significantly reduced, and he could only maintain his muscle form for a limited time each day. He expressed concern that his time as All Might, the Pillar of Peace, was coming to an end, which was why he sought a successor. Katsuki was stunned by the weight of Toshinori's words, and after a moment of contemplation, he accepted the offer. On Friday, Izuku and Adohira had picked up his friends from their homes. Unfortunately, Shoto was unable to join them, so it was just Izuku, Achiko, and Tenya. They still had classes on Saturday, so Achiko and Tenya brought their uniforms, but it wasn't a big deal. The car stopped in front of a large gate, causing confusion for Achiko and Tenya. When they saw the greenery beyond the gate, Achiko asked if they were at a park. Izuku clarified that it was just the front yard, and as they entered, Achiko realized they were going to a sleepover at a mansion. Upon arriving at Izuku's home, they were greeted by Izuku's brother, Tenko, who was waiting outside with a few servants. 𝐻𝐬 was unfazed, having attended parties at similar houses before, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was surprised to realize she was friends with two boys from wealthy families. Izuku introduced his brother to his friends, and 𝐻𝐬 greeted them with a smile, which made 𝐒𝐮𝐬 think he was handsome. The servants took their bags from the trunk, and 𝐻𝐬 invited them inside, explaining that the servants would bring their bags to their rooms while they had dinner, after which they could train in the training hall. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 couldn't help but admire the brothers, and 𝐻𝐬 noticed her gaze, asking if something was wrong. She blushed and apologized, explaining that they looked so different it was hard to believe they were brothers. 𝐻𝐬 laughed, teasing Izuku about being plain-looking, which made Izuku blush. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and 𝐻𝐬 chuckled at the banter. 𝐻𝐬 mentioned that Izuku had inherited their mother's looks, while he resembled their father. Izuku added that their father had said 𝐻𝐬 looked more like their uncle due to his long hair, which surprised 𝐻𝐬. As they entered the training hall, 𝐻𝐬 encouraged them to have fun but reminded Izuku to avoid pushing himself too hard with his power limb ability. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and 𝐻𝐬 exchanged glances, curious about what Izuku's power limb entailed. When he was 13, they discovered that his repeated use of his quirk at maximum power was slowly compromising the integrity of his bones, so he stopped using it since then. Until now. 𝐻𝐬 glared at his brother, and Izuku winced. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 recalled the time Izuku saved her from Tamura. He had used his quirk at full power to save her, and afterward he got caught by the villains. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 felt a pang of guilt. It was because of her that Izuku had almost faced disaster. Taking a deep breath, she bowed her head. 𝐻𝐬 and Izuku looked at her. She apologized, explaining that Izuku had used his full power to save her during the 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐽 incident. She hadn't known it was harmful for him, and he had been caught because of her actions. 𝐻𝐬 recognized her as the girl from that day. He thought to himself that she deserved the Best Brother award. Izuku reassured her, saying it was fine and that she was his friend. He had to save her because she was in trouble and it wasn't her fault. Izuku smiled, trying to lift her spirits. 𝐻𝐬 reflected on the situation, realizing that Izuku hadn't been in any real danger. Those low-level villains could not have harmed him, and he would never allow the Nomu or his quirk to hurt Izuku. That was why he had always kept his fingers covered and led Izuku to believe he was quirkless. He should have anticipated that Izuku would insist on going to school that day. 𝐻𝐬 clapped his hands, breaking the tension. He suggested they start training, and the three friends looked at him, their faces brightening as they nodded in agreement. 𝐻𝐬 announced he would grab something for Izuku's bones and stepped outside. He heard his brother call out, asking if it was milk again. 𝐻𝐬 confirmed it was. Fixing the collar of his turtleneck shirt, he whispered to himself about giving Izuku a new gift, wondering what their father would think. 𝐻𝐬 made his way to his room, opening a safe hidden in the back of his closet. Inside were vials labeled with the names of various quirks, containing DNA from individuals whose identities he didn't know or care about, as he was certain they were no longer alive. These quirks had been set aside by their father as potential gifts for Izuku. Izuku believed his quirks manifested randomly, thinking power limb was what they told others, while he thought gift was his true quirk, the ability to manifest multiple quirks. It was a clever and necessary deception, as 𝐻𝐬 and Hisashi understood how Izuku would react if he knew the truth about his quirk. 𝐻𝐬 selected a vial labeled unbreakable, believing it would suffice for now. 𝐻𝐬 maintained a neutral expression as he watched Izuku drink the glass of milk containing a drop of BLD. He observed Izuku absent-mindedly wipe his lips, then brighten with a sudden realization. Izuku approached his older brother and quietly shared that it had happened again. 𝐻𝐬 played along, asking what had happened this time. Izuku closed his eyes and, upon opening them, revealed it was a reinforcement quirk. 𝐻𝐬 feigned delight, though he genuinely felt pleased and inquired about the specifics. Izuku activated his new quirk in his arms, explaining that it reinforced his muscles and bones. He speculated that if he combined this with Fortify while using Power Limb at maximum, the force of his hits wouldn't recoil as much. 𝐻𝐬 smiled but expressed concern, suggesting he would feel more at ease if Izuku refrained from using Power Limb at full power. Izuku agreed. 𝐻𝐬 took the glass from Izuku and left them to train, letting out a sigh of relief. That boy was truly stressing him out. Dr. Ujiko entered the room, encountering Hisashi, who was focused on a photo he held. Ujiko pretended not to notice and pushed his cart toward him, stealing a glance at the photo without Hisashi's awareness. He informed Hisashi it was time for his medicine. Hisashi, frustrated and urgent, asked if they had found the girl. Ujiko confirmed that Hisashi's men had located her, explaining that the shy Hasaikai had been moving her since they learned he was searching for her. Hisashi clenched his hand, relieved to hear that he had pinpointed her next location and that his men were waiting for her there. Hisashi expressed that his return home had long been overdue. Ujiko took another peek at the photo of Hisashi, Tenko, and Izuku from 7 years ago. Achiko threw a now weightless barbell at Tenya, releasing her Quirks effect as soon as it gained momentum. As the training hall's door opened and Tenko entered, Achiko and Tenya's eyes widened, trying to warn him. In a swift motion, Tenko caught the 30-kilogram barbell with one hand, as if it were a mere toy. The two sighed in relief, recalling how this had happened before when Tenko effortlessly caught a heavy object in motion. Tenko laughed, remarking that he should have learned from the first time. He tossed the barbell to Izuku, who quickly activated Fortify to catch it. Tenko announced it was snack time and revealed he had brought cheese sticks, nuts, yogurt, and orange juice. Izuku placed the barbell down and inspected the food, shaking his head in disbelief at his brother's enthusiasm. Achiko and Tenya realized the snacks contained dairy and calcium, struggling to hold back their giggles. Tenko feigned innocence, prompting Izuku to pinch the bridge of his nose in exasperation. The three friends burst into laughter, enjoying the moment together. Izuku flushed red as Tenko placed a hand on his green hair. Looking up from his embarrassment, Izuku saw his brother wearing a caring smile. Tenko reminded him that tomorrow was a big day and expressed his longing for Izuku to be at his best. It was the day of the sports festival, an event anticipated by Japan every year. This year, however, was different. All eyes were on the first years, particularly Class 1, known for standing up against villains. Tenko found it amusing that the failure of their attack had unexpectedly brought fame to Izuku and his friends. As Tenko settled into his seat in the VIP area, surrounded by pro heroes, he couldn't help but think about their priorities. He smirked internally, knowing that the heroes had been searching for the League of Villains since the attack, unaware that the ringleader was among them. A shift in the seat next to him snapped Tenko out of his thoughts. He turned to see a man in an engine-themed hero costume. The man introduced himself as Tensei, not wanting to be addressed by his hero name, and acknowledged Tenko as Izuku's brother. Tenko accepted the handshake, feeling a slight smile form as Tensei thanked him for looking after Izuku during his visit. Meanwhile, Shoto grimaced at his father's words, which felt more like pressure than encouragement. He overheard Izuku on the phone, expressing his intention to take it easy during the competition. Angered by this, Shoto slapped the phone from Izuku's hand, drawing the attention of their classmates. Shoto confronted Izuku, questioning how he could consider participating without fully committing to the competition. Izuku, taken aback by Shoto's intensity, felt a mix of confusion and frustration. The atmosphere in the locker room grew tense as Shoto's voice filled with frustration. Izuku, feeling the weight of Shoto's words, bowed his head. The silence was palpable until Izuku finally raised his head, anger igniting in his eyes as he met Shoto's gaze. Aizawa-sensei entered the room, intervening to separate the two boys, who continued to glare at each other, each determined to prove themselves in the upcoming battle. As Class 1A, along with the other first-year classes, walked out to the freshman stage, they formed lines. The chief referee, Midnight, called for the first-year representative to step forward. Katsuki approached the platform, and instead of the expected boastful speech, he delivered a sincere message about heroism and the importance of doing their best. This unexpected display caught everyone off guard. Izuku, still harboring his glare, thought back to Shoto's earlier words. The signal to begin the first event rang out, and Izuku activated air cannon in his legs, leaping over the other students and gaining the lead. As he entered the tunnel, he activated his quirk, Bird's Eye View, assessing the obstacles ahead, robots, a canyon, and minefields. With a plan in mind, Izuku deactivated the quirk and charged forward. A zero-pointer locked onto him, bringing its fist down. Izuku shielded his head with his arm, and as the robot's fist made contact, the force rebounded, sending the machine tumbling. Hearing crackling behind him, Izuku turned and unleashed an air cannon punch, shattering the ice that had been closing in on him. As he continued to run, he noticed a familiar bicolored boy racing past him, prompting Izuku to quicken his pace. They approached the fall, where Izuku activated 3 of his 5 main quirks: muscle augmentation, air cannon, and unbreakable. He was determined to beat 𝐻𝗱𝗚 without relying on his most powerful quirk. Using air cannon, Izuku leaped toward the canyon while 𝐻𝗱𝗚 used his ice to propel himself along the ropes. As they neared the end of the second stage, their rivalry intensified. Suddenly, an unexpected explosion erupted between them, causing Izuku to roll upon landing. He quickly spotted Katsuki in the lead and grimaced, activating muscle augmentation and fortify on his legs to chase after him. He felt something cold creep up one of his legs as he ran, but it was quickly dispelled as he continued forward. As he neared the blonde boy, he called out Katsuki's name. The other boy glanced back, wincing at the sight of Izuku's rage-filled eyes, which caused him to slow down. Izuku smirked and jumped up, revealing ice heading toward him. Katsuki found himself caught in 𝐻𝗱𝗚's ice, which had been intended for Izuku. This allowed Izuku to regain the lead. Katsuki immediately shattered the ice with his explosions, but not before 𝐻𝗱𝗚 was able to dash past him. Izuku let out a satisfied laugh as he spotted the third stage, the minefields, just a few meters away. He covered his eyes and activated his infrared vision quirk, quickly memorizing the path he needed to take to avoid triggering any mines. Deactivating the quirk, he removed his hands and ran even faster. As he sprinted along the memorized path, he heard explosions behind him. Looking back, he saw 𝐻𝗱𝗚 gliding on his ice while Katsuki used his explosions to navigate, inadvertently setting off multiple landmines. Realizing he would soon lose his lead if he didn't act quickly, he stopped in his tracks and activated 4 of his main quirks, slamming his fist into the ground. Katsuki and 𝐻𝗱𝗚 winced at the sudden shockwave. The force of the enhanced air cannon triggered several landmines, creating a chain reaction of explosions that sent Katsuki, 𝐻𝗱𝗚, and Izuku flying. However, Izuku was propelled toward the stadium, with his fortify and unbreakable quirks lessening the impact he would have otherwise sustained. He executed a maneuver to correct his trajectory and landed in a roll, continuing his run toward the inside of the stadium where he secured first place. After crossing the finish line, he collapsed to his knees, taking several deep breaths. He had won. As he caught his breath, he noticed the eerie silence that enveloped the stadium. Looking up at the giant monitor, he saw the aftermath of his earlier actions. Moments later, the dust-covered 𝐻𝗱𝗚 and Katsuki arrived to claim second and third place, respectively. They both spotted Izuku on his knees, staring at the monitor. The screen displayed the completely devastated minefield. Some students caught in the explosion had managed to use their quirks to shield themselves, like Katsuki and 𝐻𝗱𝗚, while others were bruised and unable to react in time due to the sudden chaos. Paramedics quickly attended to those who were visibly out of the competition, while those who had shielded themselves or were fortunate enough to be far away secured their spots for the next event. Tenko noticed that Izuku remained fixated on the monitor. It was expected, given that he had caused the chaos, but Tenko found it intriguing that Izuku's expression was completely neutral. He didn't appear shocked or scared, it was as if he were watching an ordinary television show. Furthermore, Izuku had been surprisingly fierce during the race, a stark contrast to his usually gentle demeanor. For the first time, Tenko saw their father's influence in Izuku. Izuku continued to splash water on his face, closing his eyes and taking deep breaths. After one final inhale, he opened his eyes and looked at his reflection in the mirror. It dawned on him the magnitude of what he had done. He had hurt several of his classmates, all to avoid losing to 𝐻𝗱𝗚 and Katsuki. Anger had clouded his judgment, and he felt no pride in his actions. The sound of the door opening made Izuku flinch. It was his brother, who asked if he was okay. Izuku relaxed slightly and replied that he was fine now. He then inquired about the next event, which was set to begin in 10 minutes. As he wiped his face with a towel, he noticed Tenko's worried expression, causing him to wince and look away. Tenko gently told Izuku that he knew he wasn't okay and that he felt guilty for hurting the other students, urging him not to lie. He ruffled Izuku's hair playfully and placed a hand on his shoulder, leading him out of the restroom. Izuku kept his head low. Suddenly, a voice called out to him, and he looked up to see the bandaged Ochako and Tenya. His heart sank as he wondered if he had caused their injuries. As they approached, Ochako expressed her gratitude, thanking him for clearing the mines. She acknowledged the unfortunate injuries but emphasized that thanks to him, they had secured spots in the next event. Izuku winced at her words. Tenya also thanked Izuku, and overwhelmed by their gratitude and relief at knowing he hadn't harmed his friends, Izuku began to cry. Ochako and Tenya had sustained their bruises during the first two obstacles and did not consider them serious compared to the injuries others had received in the last stage. They had spent their time searching for Izuku, eventually finding Tenko, who had treated their wounds before they reunited with Izuku. The two friends were shocked by Izuku's actions but brushed it off as a split-second decision made without considering the consequences. Nemuri observed the students before her. She estimated that about 80% of the 40 students were covered in bruises before Recovery Girl healed their injuries. While there were supposed to be 42 students advancing, 2 were too exhausted to continue after their treatments. Her attention shifted to Izuku, who kept his head low. It was hard to believe that this boy had caused such an incident. Taking a deep breath, she began explaining the mechanics of the next game, realizing how difficult it would be for Izuku to form a team due to his points and previous actions. She hoped he could navigate this next challenge. From his VIP seat, Tenko watched as his little brother struggled to find teammates. Just then, Ochako and Tenya approached Izuku, offering to join his team. Then soon after, a random girl with pink hair offered to join them as well. Izuku's team consisted of Ochako as the rider, the pink-haired girl, and Izuku as the wheels, with Tenya himself acting as the horse. Tenko figured that Izuku had likely made Ochako, the pink-haired girl, and himself weightless, which would make it easier for Tenya and the girl's gadgets to move them around. Tenko wasn't surprised that his little brother could devise an effective strategy in just a few minutes. Suddenly his phone rang. He took it out of his pocket and saw that it was 𝐒𝐮𝐬. He let out a sigh, which his seatmate noticed. Tensei asked if something was wrong, and Tenko replied that it was just work-related. As much as he wanted to watch Izuku in this event, he had other matters to attend to. Tenko stood up and left the VIP area, heading to the nearest restroom. After checking that nobody else was there, he locked the door and answered the call. He asked if they had found him, and the voice on the other end confirmed they had. Tenko instructed them to open a portal to his location. After hanging up, he slipped his phone back into his pocket and faced the mirror, taking a deep breath as a black portal appeared. A bag flew from it, which Tenko caught easily. Inside was a single hand. From his villain costume. He attached the hand to his face and stepped through the portal. On the other side was a bar, where 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and another person were waiting for him. This was someone he had been looking forward to meeting, the hero killer, 𝐼𝐮. 𝐼𝐮 got straight to the point, asking what Tenko wanted. As Tenko unwrapped the bandages covering his fingers, he introduced himself as Tomura Shigaraki and expressed his longing for 𝐼𝐮 to join them. Tomura took a seat in front of the counter. 𝐼𝐮 recognized the name and noted that Tomura was part of the League of Villains. Tomura smiled beneath his mask and invited 𝐼𝐮 to sit down. 𝐼𝐮 then asked why Tomura wanted to recruit him. Tomura explained that they shared similar beliefs, stating that society was filled with false heroes who cared more about fame and privilege than genuine heroism. He mentioned that he had just come from UA's sports festival, where he observed that watching kids fight seemed more important than saving people in danger. 𝐼𝐮 frowned at this, but Tomura assured him he had no intention of causing chaos at the festival, emphasizing that meaningless chaos served no purpose. 𝐼𝐮 took a moment to consider the boy in front of him. He asked what Tomura was after, and Tomura smirked as he picked up a glass from the counter. He expressed his wish to create a new world, one devoid of the hypocrisy of heroes, where only those true to their cause would be celebrated. As he spoke, the glass in his hand slowly disintegrated. He looked back at Stain and asked if it sounded good to him. Stain could tell 𝗏𝗏𝐼𝐼 was serious. After some contemplation, he agreed to join him. Meanwhile, Tensei looked at Tenko, who had just returned from his phone call, and smiled as he shared that their brother's team had come in second, just behind 𝗏𝗏𝐽's team. He asked how the call had gone, and Tenko replied that it had gone well. Tensei suggested they go get their brothers and have lunch since the festival was on a break. As they walked, Tenko suddenly realized that 𝗏𝗏𝐽 was missing. His question made Izuku stop in his tracks, and the others paused as well. Tenko noticed Izuku clenching his fists and asked if something was wrong. Izuku's voice was low, filled with silent anger and sadness as he wondered if 𝗏𝗏𝐽 had ever been his friend. Tenko knelt to meet his brother's gaze and asked what the problem was. Izuku explained that earlier, before the first event, 𝗏𝗏𝐽 had overheard him speaking to their father and had suddenly become angry for no apparent reason. Since then, they had been competing against each other in the events, and Izuku was confused about 𝗏𝗏𝐽's anger. Tenko straightened up and pondered aloud that 𝗏𝗏𝐽's anger might stem from jealousy over Izuku's relationship with their father, especially given the rumors about the Todoroki household not being a warm home. Tenya interjected, recalling that 𝗏𝗏𝐽 had accused Izuku of intentionally planning to underperform in the sports festival. Curious, Tenko asked Izuku if he had been discussing his bones with their father. Izuku confirmed he had, and Tenko speculated that 𝗏𝗏𝐽 might have misinterpreted the conversation, thinking Izuku was confident enough to hurt others. He suggested that if 𝗏𝗏𝐽 was a product of their father's rigorous training, it could explain his reaction. No one could match the skill of 𝗏𝗏𝐽 or his friend with their quirks without dedicated training since their abilities had first manifested. This was likely why 𝗏𝗏𝐽 sought to befriend him. He recognized a kindred spirit in someone who had also been homeschooled and trained from the beginning. The only difference was that 𝗏𝐬 could be difficult, while their dad was simply their dad. Tenko shared this insight with a smile at his little brother. Tensei, Tenya, and Achiko blinked in disbelief, trying to process how Tenko had pieced all that together from just a few hints. 𝗏𝗏𝐽 felt the weight of defeat once again. As he turned a corner, he encountered someone he wished to avoid. He attempted to brush past the man, but a hand landed on his shoulder, halting him. The man began to offer unsolicited advice about his recent match, suggesting that using his left side would have caught his opponent off guard. 𝗏𝗏𝐽 flicked the man's hand away, firmly stating that he would never use his left side. He was determined to win against Midoriya using only half of his power, wanting to prove that abandoning his father's training was a grave mistake. The final event commenced, with Midnight announcing that 2 students had withdrawn, allowing Itsuka and Tetsu from the 5th team to take their places. The first battle was set between Tenya and 𝗏𝗏𝐽, followed by Izuku against Itsuka Kendo. Izuku searched for 𝗏𝗏𝐽 in the crowd and found him at the back, his expression a mix of anger and sadness. Izuku realized that 𝗏𝗏𝐽's training must have been harsh, which might explain 𝗏𝗏𝐽's longing for friendship. He saw a reflection of himself in Izuku. The battle between 𝗏𝗏𝐽 and Tenya was swift. 𝗏𝗏𝐽 created a towering ice wall that trapped Tenya, preventing him from continuing the fight. Izuku watched with concern as 𝗏𝗏𝐽 melted the ice around Tenya, but he knew he had to concentrate on his own match against Itsuka Kendo from Class 1B, who was also in hero studies. He understood the importance of not underestimating her. As the match began, Izuku activated his air cannon and launched a punch at Itsuka, who skillfully dodged. Recognizing her proficiency in melee combat, Izuku prepared himself. Itsuka charged at him, but he leaped over her, landing safely on the other side. They faced each other, both presidents of their respective classes, exchanging determined glares as they circled one another, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then, in unison, they charged. Izuku activated his muscle augmentation and unbreakable quirks. He aimed a punch with his right arm, but Itsuka easily deflected it with her enlarged left hand. She countered with an uppercut, her hand expanding as it made contact. Izuku blocked, but the force pushed him off the ground. Seizing the opportunity, Itsuka grabbed his hands and attempted to throw him out of the ring. However, Izuku used his strengthened arms to propel himself back inside. Itsuka anticipated his trajectory and positioned herself to intercept him, grabbing his leg midair and attempting to throw him out again. Yet, Izuku managed to return to the ring once more. This time, he aimed directly for 𝐼𝐶, catching her off guard. He swung his arm down, and although she raised her hands to shield herself, the impact cracked the ground beneath her. As she recovered from the blow, Izuku seized the moment, grabbing one of 𝐼𝐶's hands and throwing her out of the ring. Midnight declared Izuku the winner as 𝐼𝐶 touched the ground. He rushed over to help her up, asking if she was all right and assuring her that he hadn't thrown her too hard. They exchanged compliments about their fight before returning to their respective teams. Izuku took his place among Class 1A, watching the subsequent matches unfold. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐥𝐬 faced Mei from Support Studies, who showcased her gadgets while using 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐥𝐬 as a test subject. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐥𝐬 ultimately won when Mei stepped out of the ring, but he remained shy and avoided attention. 𝐼𝐶𝐬 triumphed over 𝐒𝐮𝐬, and Katsuki easily defeated Denki. Momo claimed victory against Mina, while 𝐼𝐵HA won the tiebreaker against 𝗧𝗬𝗧𝗟. Finally, it was time for Izuku to face 𝐮𝐮𝐬. In the waiting room, Tenko visited him, expressing concern. Izuku confided his uncertainty about how to fight 𝐮𝐮𝐬, torn between friendship and competition. Tenko reminded him that being a hero meant getting involved, no matter the personal stakes. They intervened in matters that people would usually leave alone. Tenko thought to himself that their father would certainly understand this situation with all might. It was a hero's duty to help a friend in need. Izuku approached the ring and saw 𝐮𝐮𝐬, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and determination that matched his quirk. Izuku's brow furrowed with concern. He understood that it was his responsibility as a hero to assist his friend. As the match began, 𝐮𝐮𝐬 immediately launched an ice attack towards Izuku. Reacting swiftly, Izuku activated impact recoil, shattering the ice upon contact. 𝐮𝐮𝐬 continued to unleash a barrage of ice attacks, but each one was met with Izuku's quick responses, either through impact recoil or the force of his air cannon punches. 𝐮𝐮𝐬's frustration grew. Izuku had not used his power limb to its full potential since that morning. His arms had not swelled and twisted as they had before his declaration. Not during the obstacle race, not during the cavalry battle, and certainly not now. Determined, 𝐮𝐮𝐬 sent forth a stronger ice attack, vowing to make Izuku use his full power. Izuku noticed the increased size of the attack. He prepared himself and, at the right moment, punched with all his might, combining the powers of air cannon and impact recoil to shatter the ice. As the ice cleared, Izuku realized 𝐮𝐮𝐬 was no longer in his previous position. Suddenly, he felt a punch land on his face. Before he could recover, 𝐮𝐮𝐬 grabbed his shirt and pulled him in for another hit. In retaliation, Izuku seized 𝐮𝐮𝐬's shoulders and headbutt him, causing both to stumble back. Seizing the moment, 𝐮𝐮𝐬 shot another ice attack at Izuku, powerful enough to send him flying out of the ring. Izuku managed to recover by using air cannon to propel himself back. 𝐮𝐮𝐬 gritted his teeth and sent an ice wall towards Izuku, hoping to force him to use his quirk at maximum capacity. However, Izuku, determined to limit himself to his 5 main quirks, shattered the incoming ice with only 4 of them. 𝐮𝐮𝐬's fists, now covered in frostbite, clenched in frustration. Despite the pain, his anger boiled within him. The absence of Izuku's twisted limbs only fueled his irritation. 𝐮𝐮𝐬 shouted in frustration, demanding to know why Izuku wouldn't use his full power. Izuku responded, expressing that he was not using his abilities because they were slowly destroying him. 𝐮𝐮𝐬 winced at the revelation, realizing the weight of his words. He felt a pang of regret for treating his friend like an enemy. As 𝐮𝐮𝐬 fell to his knees, he apologized profusely, tears streaming down his face. Izuku, amidst his own tears, felt relief at the reconciliation. In the end, 𝐮𝐮𝐬 forfeited the match, granting the victory to Izuku. Recover Girl entered the scene, assuring them both that they were healed but recommending they stay for further observation. 𝐮𝐮𝐬 inquired about Izuku's condition, and Izuku explained that Recovery Girl's healing allowed his bones to return to normal, as long as he refrained from using his swelled limbs. Just then, Tenko and a bandaged Aizawa-sensei entered the room. Aizawa demanded answers regarding Midnight's comments about Izuku's quirk. Tenko explained that it was a side effect of Izuku using his quirk at maximum capacity multiple times. Izuku introduced Tenko to Aizawa-sensei, who acknowledged Tenko's reputation among the staff. Tenko made a sarcastic remark about Aizawa's condition, prompting Izuku to reprimand him for his rudeness. Aizawa accepted the situation and left the two brothers to rest, while Izuku playfully hit Tenko's arm for his behavior. He almost died, Tenko, so Izuku reminded his brother to be more sensitive. Tenko apologized, explaining that the situation left a bad taste in his mouth. Suddenly, Shudo asked a peculiar question that caught the two brothers off guard. He inquired if Tenko had liked the other person. The brothers exchanged confused and shocked looks, and Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at the misunderstanding. Tenko clarified that it was just a figure of speech to express his dislike. Izuku, still chuckling, expressed his confusion about Tenko's preferences. He pointed out that Tenko had spent most of the day with Tensei, a hero he was okay with, yet he disliked All Might. He also noted that Tenko thought 𝗟𝗏 was unpleasant but didn't seem to like Aizawa-sensei either. Izuku wondered how Tenko could discern which heroes he liked and which he didn't. Tenko simply ruffled his brother's green hair and said he just knew. Tenko then suggested they watch Ochiko's match, walking over to the television in the clinic and switching it on. Izuku was confused, thinking Eijiro's fight was next. Tenko explained that Eijiro's match had ended quickly, and unfortunately, he had lost. Izuku felt disappointed but hoped Ochiko would fare better. However, despite her efforts, she was ultimately outmaneuvered by 𝗟𝐼𝐽𝐸 and Dark Shadow, leading to their victory. The next and final battle of the quarter-final round was between Katsuki and Momo. Many assumed Katsuki was an idiot due to his attitude and personality, hoping Momo would win to prove that brains could beat brawn. However, Katsuki was not only explosive but also strategic in his battles. In the end, Katsuki emerged victorious. As Izuku prepared for his match, Tenko wished him good luck, and Izuku smiled in response. Tenko pointed to the corner, indicating where they would be watching from. Shudo reminded Izuku to be careful and not hurt himself. Izuku reassured them that he had made it this far without injury. On his way to the ring, Izuku encountered Eijiro, who looked worried and urgent. Eijiro warned Izuku about his opponent, 𝗏𝗏, suggesting he had a brainwashing quirk. He explained that two students who had withdrawn from the tournament recalled nothing about their battles after speaking with 𝗏𝗏. Eijiro urged Izuku not to engage with him. Grateful for the warning, Izuku promised to keep it in mind as he continued to the ring. Upon arrival, Izuku was surprised to see that 𝗏𝗏 was the dark-haired student who had threatened Class 1A during the announcement. The match began, and Izuku took a fighting stance. 𝗏𝗏 taunted him, suggesting that many heroes had their eyes on Izuku due to his earlier performance. Izuku remained silent, focusing on the match. 𝗏𝗏 continued to provoke him, speculating about who had warned Izuku about his quirk. He mentioned a classmate and made disparaging remarks about another student who had fought Izuku. Frustration crossed 𝗏𝗏's face when he realized Izuku wasn't responding. Then, he seemed to have an epiphany about Izuku's previous opponent, belittling him for forfeiting his chance. Suddenly, Izuku felt a shift in his senses. His surroundings blurred, and he could hear a ringing in his ears. He found himself unable to move as 𝗏𝗏's voice echoed in his mind, commanding him to leave the ring. Panic surged within him as his body began to comply against his will. Desperate to regain control, Izuku struggled internally, but it was futile. As he was drawn toward the edge of the ring, he heard a whispering voice urging him to give something back. Confused, he looked around and saw dark figures emerging from below the ring, crawling toward him. They all shared one unsettling trait: bright white sad eyes. The figures chanted for him to give something back, their voices overlapping and growing louder. They reached his feet, their cold touch sending shivers through him. Izuku felt overwhelmed, unable to escape their grasp. The figures continued to close in, and he could only scream in terror as they surrounded him. Before he could leave the ring, Izuku suddenly fell back, the impact snapping him out of 𝗏𝗏's quirk. He lay still, feeling as though hours had passed. His face was pale, breaths slow and shallow, as memories of the dark figures flooded back. The sensation of their cold touches lingered, and he let out a bone-chilling scream filled with pure terror, unable to stop. He just kept screaming at the top of his lungs, tears streaming down his face. Midnight immediately sensed something was wrong and rushed toward the boy. As she placed her hand on his shoulder, he looked at her with sheer fear and terror. His arms swelled and twisted, tearing through his uniform's sleeve as it continued to grow, preparing for a punch. Midnight recalled the boy's earlier conversation with his friend. This is bad, she thought. Before he could unleash his punch, Midnight activated her quirk. She watched as his terror-filled eyes slowly closed, taking in the calming aroma. His arm returned to normal, and she caught his unconscious body. 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐽𝐸, bring Izuku to the clinic, she instructed. 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐽𝐸 approached and carried the boy away. Midnight stood up and announced that ♯NSO Hitoshi from Class 1C was the winner by default. She glanced at ♯NSO, who looked shocked and scared. He expressed that this was not what usually happened, and Midnight nodded, signaling him to go. ♯NSO took a deep breath and ran after 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐽𝐸. Tenko ran to the clinic as fast as he could, the echoes of his brother's screams replaying in his mind, urging him to reach him even faster. Upon arriving, he slammed the door open and found Recovery Girl, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽𝐸, 𝐻𝐿, Tenya, and 𝗏𝗏𝐿 inside. Izuku lay unconscious on the bed. As he stepped inside, he was immediately met with an apology from the dark-haired boy, who claimed he didn't know what had happened and that his quirk usually didn't act this way. Tenko gritted his teeth, grabbing the boy by the neck and slamming him against the wall. The boy's fear was palpable as Tenko tightened his grip, causing him to whimper. Tenko's actions were halted when a familiar cloth wrapped around his arm. 𝗏𝗏𝐸 declared that he would not allow him to hurt any of the students. Tenko scoffed internally, thinking that 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸𝐸 never learned. He wrapped the cloth around his right arm a few more times and pulled ♯NSO closer, surprising him with his strength. When ♯NSO was near enough, Tenko grabbed his right hand, the one that had been disintegrated before, and squeezed it. ♯NSO winced at the pressure. You have an interesting fighting pattern, do you know that? Tenko remarked. ♯NSO frowned, realizing who stood before him. It couldn't be Tenko. ♯NSO asked, watching as the voice of his green-haired student softened the man's expression. Tenko released his grip, and ♯NSO freed him from the capture tape. ♯NSO looked at his hand, recalling the grip of the villain who had harmed him. Could he be? Izuku, are you okay? Tenko asked as he sat on the edge of the bed. Izuku nodded, indicating he was fine, but his expression quickly shifted to one of terror. He hugged his older brother, burying his face in his shirt and letting his tears flow. Please don't. Don't make me. I don't want to remember. Izuku's words broke Tenko's heart. He gently rubbed the boy's hair, reassuring him. Don't worry. I'm here now. Everything's going to be all right. Tenko's soothing voice helped calm Izuku's tears. ♯NSO observed the scene, noting the bond between the brothers. In the final round, ♯NSO faced off against Katsuki. Still affected by the earlier incident with Izuku, ♯NSO immediately forfeited, making Katsuki the champion. ♯NSO watched from the announcer's booth as All Might presented the winners with their medals. The 4 winners were present: Katsuki in first place, ♯NSO in second, and Izuku and 𝐒𝐮𝐴𝐽𝐸 sharing third. Despite ♯NSO's presence, Izuku insisted on attending the awarding ceremony, believing that not showing up after his earlier bout would disinterest hero agencies. To prevent any further reactions, the teachers ensured that Izuku and ♯NSO were placed at opposite ends, giving each awardee enough distance from one another. Still, ♯NSO was prepared to erase the students' quirks if necessary. All Might first approached Izuku, who brightened at the sight of the medal. Are you okay now, young Izuku? All Might asked. The green-haired boy smiled sheepishly, confirming he was fine. Good. You did well today, All Might said, hugging him before moving on to 𝐒𝐮𝐴𝐽𝐸, offering compliments and advice. Next, All Might addressed ♯NSO. Young ♯NSO, he began, his voice calm and gentle, though it did little to ease the boy's nerves. I would like to ask you something. Why do you think young Izuku didn't attack first? ♯NSO was taken aback, unsure how to respond. I never thought about it, he admitted. He was waiting for you to show what you can do. He expected you both to engage in hand-to-hand combat, Toshinori explained. But why? He's already stronger with his quirks. What made him think I had a chance against him? ― asked, confusion evident on his face. Hand-to-hand combat is not just about strength. It's about strategy, formulating a battle plan with your advantages and disadvantages in mind, and using your opponent's strengths against them, Toshinori elaborated. He hung the second-place medal around ―'s neck and hugged him. Think about it, young ―, All Might said as he walked toward Katsuki. So, how did I do? Katsuki asked, maintaining a neutral expression. You did great, young Katsuki. But your real training is about to begin, All Might replied, placing the first-place medal around his neck. I won't let you down, Katsuki promised, and All Might's smile widened as he embraced his successor. Turning to the audience, All Might declared that while these four were the winners this time, everyone had the chance to stand on that podium, having worked hard to reach where they were now. ― flinched at the proclamation. The future of these heroes in training is bright. All Might concluded, marking the end of this year's UA Sports Festival. As Tenko and Izuku prepared to get into the car, Tenko's phone rang. He answered, Hey, Dad. Izuku looked at his brother, curious. Already? But what about Izuku? Oh, okay. Tenko handed his phone to Izuku. Dad wants to talk to you. Izuku took the phone and held it to his ear. Faded. I'm guessing you just finished watching the festival. Yes. Are you okay? Yeah. I'm fine now. Izuku just wanted to rest at home. Hisashi acknowledged his feelings, complimenting him on his performance at the first event, but Izuku remained silent. Hisashi then asked Izuku to put him on loudspeaker, and Izuku complied. Tenko's face brightened when Hisashi informed him that he could stay home for a few more days to support Izuku, but he expected Tenko to come when called. Tenko expressed his gratitude, and after hanging up, he offered to cook katsudon for dinner. As they got into the car, Izuku stared out the window, looking weary. Suddenly, Izuku flinched at the thought of seeing one of the dark figures again. Tenko noticed and instinctively pulled Izuku into a comforting hug, reassuring him that he was right there. Meanwhile, Shota observed as Sekijiro and Hisashi entered Nedzu's office. Sekijiro inquired about the reason for the meeting, and Nedzu invited them to sit down. After a sip of tea, Nedzu indicated that Shota had an interesting proposition to share. Shota took a deep breath and explained that he wanted to transfer Shinso Hitoshi, a student from General Studies, to Hero Studies. Hisashi noted that Shinso had placed second in the competition, while Sekijiro expressed his doubts about Shinso's qualifications, believing he relied too heavily on his quirk and lacked fighting experience. Shota countered that Shinso simply needed a proper teacher, and he was willing to take him on a trial basis during the internships. He suggested that they could evaluate Shinso's progress afterward. Sekijiro questioned why he was needed if Shota had an empty seat, and Hisashi pointed out that it was likely due to Izuku's reaction to Shinso. Shota admitted that he was concerned about putting them in the same room, given Izuku's fearful response during their previous encounters. Later, Tenko woke up suddenly, thinking he heard Izuku crying. Instead, he found his little brother peacefully asleep. Izuku had been struggling with nightmares since the sports festival, prompting him to ask Tenko to sleep beside him for comfort. Tenko gently pulled Izuku closer, reminiscing about his own childhood memories of seeking comfort from their mother. Izuku never had the chance to meet their mother, who passed away shortly after his BnHA. Tenko often thought about how much Izuku resembled her, with his green hair and eyes, which made him cherish their bond even more. When Izuku stirred, he apologized for waking Tenko, who reassured him that he hadn't been disturbed. Izuku expressed his gratitude for Tenko's presence, acknowledging the discomfort of waking up to his cries. Tenko dismissed his concerns, and as he glanced at the clock, he noted it was nearing 5 a.m. Izuku, noticing his brother's gaze, declared he wanted to go to school, feeling ready after missing a day. Tenko sighed but smiled, agreeing to help Izuku get ready for breakfast. At school, Izuku stood before the door marked 1A, taking a deep breath before entering with a cheerful greeting. However, he froze at the sight of messy dark purple hair, his body tensing as memories of dark figures flooded back. He silently called for Tenko in his mind. Just then, Aizawa-sensei placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, bringing him back to reality and instructing the students to take their seats. When Aizawa called out to Izuku, he felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Aizawa welcomed him back, and Izuku sheepishly returned the smile as he moved to his seat. Aizawa informed the class that since Izuku had been absent during the hero name assignment, he would need to present his name before homeroom ended. Izuku winced at the thought, realizing he had never given it much consideration. He recalled that All Might's name was derived from All Right, representing his quirk. Izuku pondered a name that would reflect his own quirk, Gift, which allowed him to possess multiple quirks. As he contemplated this, the phrase, all for one, came to mind. Suddenly he snapped back to reality, noticing his classmates staring at him in surprise. He was mumbling again. Izuku asked if there was something he could do for Aizawa-sensei. The teacher inquired whether Izuku had thought about his hero name. Taking a deep breath, Izuku stood up and responded affirmatively. Aizawa then prompted him to share the name he had chosen. With another deep breath, Izuku revealed that he had decided on All of One. The class fell silent for a moment before Aizawa asked him to explain the reasoning behind his choice. Izuku explained that he wanted to resonate with All Might's name, recognizing that it truly represented what All Might stood for and his quirk. He aimed to do something similar. Kyuka then questioned how All of One related to his quirk. Izuku flinched, realizing that his classmates only knew about Power Limb. He quickly recalled a similar name he had heard and thought it was cool, using that as inspiration. His classmates seemed to accept his explanation. Aizawa instructed him to sit down and mentioned that he could come to him later to receive a list of hero agencies interested in drafting him. As Izuku sat down, he suddenly wondered when he had first heard that name, All for One. It was probably one of the joke names Tenko had suggested to him. He brushed the thought aside. Katsuki entered Toshinori's office, finding the hero seated on his sofa in his true form. Katsuki waved his phone and asked if Toshinori had called him there for a reason. Toshinori smiled and gestured for him to take a seat, then got straight to the point. He suggested that Katsuki choose 𝐼𝐼𝐻 as his hero agency for his internship. Katsuki looked confused and asked why 𝐼𝐼𝐻 was the choice. Toshinori explained that 𝐼𝐼𝐻 was aware of One for All and had expressed a longing to train Katsuki personally. This revelation made Katsuki sit up straighter, realizing that the hero who had trained All Might must be impressive. He quickly agreed to the suggestion. Tenko waved goodbye to his little brother as Izuku entered Gang Orca's hero agency, then got into the car. He felt relieved that Izuku would be away from Hosu for the week, as he had worried about his brother picking a hero agency nearby. At least he wouldn't have to worry about Izuku getting caught up in any of the League of Villains schemes again. Earlier, their father had called, informing Tenko that he had only 2 more days before he had to go back abroad. Tenko despised those words, feeling trapped in Japan while he could easily visit Izuku. He sighed, hoping that if this mission succeeded, their father's return to Izuku would be guaranteed. They just needed to find that girl. Tenko recalled something Izuku had said that morning. His hero name was All of One. Izuku had smiled proudly when he mentioned it, but Tenko felt discomfort at the realization that All of One sounded too similar to All for One, their father's villain name. He blurted out his frustration, realizing that Izuku likely didn't know the significance of the name. If word spread about a hero in training calling himself All of One, it could draw unwanted attention from both the criminal world and the hero industry, potentially linking Izuku to their family. Tenko grimaced at the thought. They had worked hard to keep Izuku away from their business, and now it seemed they were on the verge of jeopardizing that. His phone pinged with a message from an unknown sender. Opening it, he found a message from 𝐼𝐻 asking to discuss Izuku. Tenko rolled his eyes and instructed the chauffeur to stop by UA before heading home. Upon arriving at UA, Tenko stepped out of the car and glared at the gates before making his way inside. He navigated the building for about 10 minutes before finding the door marked 𝐼𝐻. Inside, he frowned at the sight of ♯with 𝐼𝐻, both looking like they belonged together in their capture cloths. ♯ winced at Tenko's presence, and 𝐼𝐻 asked him to step out for a moment. Once the door closed, Tenko demanded to know what 𝐼𝐻 wanted. 𝐼𝐻 invited Tenko to sit down and poured coffee into 2 mugs. As they settled in, 𝐼𝐻 explained that he wanted to learn more about Izuku's quirk to better support him. Tenko leaned back, noting that if 𝐼𝐻 needed information, he could have simply called. 𝐼𝐻 acknowledged this but added that he also wanted to meet the family of the student who had excelled in the hero course's recommendations exam. Tenko wanted to understand the kind of person who claimed to hate heroes yet allowed his younger brother to train to become one. He smirked, suggesting that heroes often failed to comprehend the existence of those who despised them. He decided to share a story. When Izuku was 13, he had fractured his left arm during training, a first for both him and their father, who shared the same quirk. After a doctor's visit, they learned that Izuku's quirk was becoming too powerful for his body to handle. From that point on, he was cautioned against using it at full strength, and he mostly adhered to that warning. However, Tenko noted with a bored expression that his brother was a massive fan of All Might, eager to emulate him, even if it meant enduring pain from using a power so similar to that of the hero. Tenko placed his mug on the table, and 𝐻𝐻 nodded, absorbing the information. 𝐻𝐻's gaze shifted to Tenko's bandaged fingers, prompting him to inquire about their condition. Tenko frowned, feigning ignorance at first but then revealing that he was quirkless. The injuries were merely the result of overexertion during his childhood. After a moment of silence, 𝐻𝐻 asked about Tenko's occupation. Tenko raised an eyebrow and explained that he managed an overseas branch of their family company. 𝐻𝐻 nodded but remained quiet, leading Tenko to question if their conversation was finished. 𝐻𝐻 confirmed it was, thanking him for his time. As Tenko stood to leave, 𝐻𝐻 unexpectedly addressed him, using the name Tamura. Tenko halted, turning back to see 𝐻𝐻 glaring at him, hand poised on his capture cloth. Tenko maintained a straight face as he corrected 𝐻𝐻, asserting that his name was Tenko, not Tamura. 𝐻𝐻 apologized for the mistake, and Tenko glared before exiting the room. As he walked through the building, Tenko felt his anger simmering beneath the surface. He cursed 𝐻𝐻 in his mind, struggling against the urge to unleash his frustration. He wondered when 𝐻𝐻 had figured him out, his thoughts racing as he sought the exit. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice. He paused, glancing at the sign above the door that read, All Might. The door to All Might's office was slightly ajar, allowing the conversation to drift into the hallway. Tenko leaned against the wall, listening intently. All Might was discussing his decision to choose 𝐾𝐮𝐫𝐭 as his successor. Tenko's eyes widened in surprise. 𝐾𝐮 was the new successor of One for All. A twisted smile crept onto Tenko's lips as he moved away from the wall, realizing that his visit to UA had not been in vain after all. Izuku waved goodbye to his brother, watching the car drive away before turning to face the building. He took a deep breath, preparing for his second day of internships. Although he had felt nervous the day before, he found 𝐾𝐮𝐽 to be surprisingly kind, despite his intimidating appearance. The sidekicks had also been welcoming, and Izuku had even had the chance to try out their cement guns. Before he left, 𝐾𝐮𝐽 had advised him to remain calm and control his emotions. The pro-hero's words echoed in Izuku's mind. He understood that a hero must keep a cool head during missions, setting aside emotions that could cloud judgment and lead to harm. As they traveled to 𝐒𝐮𝐽𝐽's agency in Hosu, 𝐾𝐮𝐽 mentioned that he had been asked to provide a second opinion on a strategy against the hero killer. He invited Izuku to accompany him to observe how different agencies could collaborate on a case, emphasizing that this was part of Izuku's learning experience. Grateful for the opportunity, Izuku bowed, his enthusiasm evident, even if 𝐾𝐮𝐽's grin was somewhat intimidating. On their way, Kugo noticed that Izuku seemed lost in thought. After reviewing Izuku's school records, Kugo realized that he had ranked second in UA's recommendations exam, only taking first place when another student backed out. Despite his unassuming appearance, Kugo sensed that Izuku was exceptionally bright. Izuku's mind was preoccupied with thoughts of the hero killer. 𝐮𝐻𝐻 was a notorious fighter, having incapacitated numerous pro-heroes and killed several. Izuku pondered whether 𝐮𝐻𝐻's success was solely due to his combat skills or if his quirk played a significant role. Suddenly an idea struck him. He asked 𝐾𝐮𝐽 if he thought 𝐮𝐻𝐻's quirk could be a form of paralysis. 𝐾𝐮𝐽 surprised by the suddenness of the question, responded affirmatively. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸's team suspected that 𝐒𝐮 might possess a paralysis quirk, which would explain how swiftly he was able to defeat all those pro-heroes, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 noted. The boy questioned whether 𝐒𝐮 attacked first, leading 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to confirm that his quirk likely required some form of physical contact to activate. 𝐒𝐮𝐬's mutant eyes widened at the realization. Just then, the boy's phone rang. Izuku took it out of his pocket and answered, acknowledging Tenko's call. Tenko expressed his regret about having to leave earlier than expected, explaining that he and his father had miscalculated their time. Although Izuku's expression dimmed slightly, he maintained a bright tone, assuring Tenko that he understood that unexpected things happen. After Tenko hung up, Izuku let out a deep sigh, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 observed the sadness in the boy's demeanor. After some time, 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB and Izuku arrived at Hosu, where two sidekicks from Team 𝐼𝐻𝐷 greeted them at the entrance. As they were led to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸's office, Izuku found himself intrigued by the similarities and differences between the two hero agencies. The sight of Izuku's happiness brought a warm smile to 𝐒𝐮𝐬's face, despite his intimidating appearance. Inside the office, Tensei and Tenya welcomed them. Tenya was surprised to see his friend with 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB and acknowledged Izuku's presence. Izuku explained that 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB thought it would be beneficial for him to observe the cooperation between pro-heroes. Tenya, remembering the professional environment, corrected himself to refer to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸 formally. Once the door was closed, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸 initiated the meeting, asking 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB to present his intern's thoughts on the case. The room turned its attention to Izuku, who appeared confused by the sudden focus on him. After realizing what was expected, he stammered about his role as an observer and questioned what he could contribute. 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB, with a stern voice that suggested authority, requested Izuku to share his earlier discussion regarding 𝐮's quirk. Understanding the implication, Izuku tensed but proceeded to explain his belief that 𝐮's paralyzing quirk might require physical contact to activate. He further hypothesized that 𝐮 specifically needed his victims' BLD to paralyze them. Tenya inquired about the basis for Izuku's hypothesis. Izuku pointed out that 𝐮's choice of weapons were blades, and survivors had reported being wounded before becoming incapacitated. He speculated that 𝐮 might use his blades to collect BLD from his victims. The pro-heroes listened in awe, impressed by Izuku's deductive reasoning, which reminded Tensei of Tenko's insights during the sports festival. Despite Izuku's disclaimer about his thoughts being mere speculation, the logical nature of his ideas resonated with the pro-heroes, who recognized their potential importance. After a long day, 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB and Izuku were finally on their way back to their agency. Although 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB had intended to share his thoughts, Izuku's contributions had proven valuable. 𝐒𝐮𝐬, acknowledging Izuku's help, offered to treat him to dinner. Initially taken aback, Izuku declined, insisting he wasn't hungry. However, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 insisted, emphasizing that Izuku deserved it for his assistance. Suddenly, the car came to a halt, nearly sending Izuku forward from his seat, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 caught him in time. The driver was mostly unharmed due to the airbag deploying, but they soon heard muffled screams from outside. Rushing out of the car, they were met with chaos as civilians fled from villains, reminiscent of the Numu attack at USJ. 𝐴𝐻𝐿RB instructed Izuku to stay close, and together they found themselves caught in what would soon be known as the Hosu incident. Weeks had passed since they had gone into hiding. Kai, keeping a watchful eye on 𝗟𝗍, who was covered in bandages, felt a surge of protectiveness. He had ensured that her hair was removed to prevent anyone from stealing her quirk. Determined, he vowed to never let 𝐿/1 get to her. As the limousine came to a stop, Kai noticed the driver enter a building. Moments later, a message came through the walkie-talkie of the passenger seat, confirming that everything was clear for them to enter. Kai took note of the surroundings as the car swayed and moved with each of the 8 bullets getting off. Mimic and Chronostasis exited after them, and finally, Kai carried 𝗟𝗍 in his arms and left the car as well. Together, they all entered the building. The building was unremarkable, just a standard apartment complex. The rooms were small, making them affordable even for those without roommates. However, none of those rooms served as their safe house. There was no way 12 of them could fit into a single room, and Kai would not allow that. Instead, the safe house was located beneath the building. The first room on the ground floor was actually the entrance to the safe house, situated a few meters below ground. After becoming the new leader of the 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽, Kai had ordered the members to abandon their previous safe houses. He then constructed new ones and assigned the locations to different 𝐒𝐮𝐽 members, rather than having everyone memorize them all. This strategy aims to reduce the risk of the safe house locations being leaked. To obtain all the locations, one would need to go through the entire 𝐒𝐮𝐽 or get them directly from Kai, whichever was easier. It was an almost foolproof plan. Almost. This uncertainty was what made Kai anxious. The slight chance that they could be ambushed in a place meant to be safe weighed heavily on him. He had come too far to be careless now, especially knowing that the one trying to find them was a formidable foe. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty hallway leading to the safe house, brightly lit by white light bulbs, illuminating the door at the end even from the stairs. After a few more minutes of echoing footsteps, they finally arrived at the door. Kurono approached it and opened it, stepping inside with Mimic. The room was dim, with only some areas illuminated by the hallway light. Kurono quickly moved to the light switch on the left side of the room, and as Kai entered, he felt something was off. Tension gripped him as he wondered where one of the members had gone. With a click, the lights turned on, and Kai's eyes widened in surprise. Sitting casually on the couch with his feet up on the table was Tamura Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains. Kai instinctively dodged an attack from his right, courtesy of Stain. He quickly used his quirk on the floor, sending spikes toward the hero killer. Stain evaded the spikes as they crumbled into dust, landing beside Tamura, who used his quirk to counter Kai's attack by neutralizing the spikes. Kai scanned for the other members, but where they had been, only trails of black mist remained. Frustration surged within him. Tamura smirked beneath his mask, commenting on the failed attack with a casual tone. He expressed a longing to bring Kai to his knees, especially after the trouble he had caused. Before the confrontation escalated, Tamura suggested a meeting with his father by opening a laptop on the table, revealing a live video chat with 𝐿. The man's voice dripped with disappointment and mockery as he questioned Kai's treatment of Eri. Kai snapped back, refusing to be addressed by his former name. 𝐿's response was a mixture of satisfaction and disdain. Kai realized he should have anticipated this. The missing member had only communicated through the radio, a clear warning sign. Nevertheless, he maintained his composure. He retorted that 𝐿 was only interested in Eri's quirk to fix his own issues, implying that he would discard her afterward. Kai knew the exits were likely guarded, and if Eri was present, it meant they were determined to finish this. 𝐿 chuckled, causing Kai to tense further. The man proposed a bet, claiming he could teach Eri to control her quirk in 2 months. Kai dismissed the statement, but he noticed Eri's reaction to the man's words, feeling a flicker of hope within her. 𝐿's voice took on an eerily comforting tone as he assured Eri that Tamura would save her from the monster. With that, Tamura sprang into action. At UA, the atmosphere in Tashinori's office was tense. When 𝐿𝐼𝐴 had called him with news about the police investigation into the League of Villains, Tashinori sensed it was significant. 𝐿𝐼𝐴, looking serious and uneasy, delivered the shocking information. Tamura Shigaraki was revealed to be the son and successor of Tashinori's archnemesis. The revelation left Tashinori in stunned silence, his face reflecting horror as he processed the news. He buried his face in his hands, whispering in disbelief that he had a son. It took a moment for him to gather himself, but once he did, he urged 𝐿𝐼𝐴 to continue, realizing there was more to uncover. 𝐿𝐼𝐴 explained that upon further investigation, they discovered Tamura had first become active 4 years ago. 2 years after defeating his father, 𝐿𝐼𝐴 explained the situation to Tashinori. It seemed that the attack at USJ was indeed an act of revenge. Tashinori remained silent, processing the information. 𝐿𝐼𝐴 continued, bringing up Nomu, which prompted Tashinori to look up, curious about what he meant. 𝐿𝐼𝐴 handed over a folder, revealing shocking details. Inside, Tashinori found DNA from 4 different individuals. It appeared that Nomu had been created in a lab, with quirks artificially injected into him. This experimentation might have 𝗟𝗶 him of all higher brain function. The thought of such inhumane practices disgusted Toshinori. He realized that Nomu was just like his father, showing no regard for human life and transforming people into mindless soldiers. Toshinori gritted his teeth, his eyes blazing with fury. Even if Tamura Shigaraki was merely following in his father's footsteps, Toshinori could never forgive him for turning humans into monsters and attacking his students. Naomasa pointed out that the fact Shigaraki was the son of Toshinori's archnemesis made him even more dangerous. A heart filled with hatred and a longing for revenge would stop at nothing to achieve its goals. Toshinori agreed with this assessment. At 4:10 p.m., Stain sheathed his swords, the sound echoing in the room. It had taken them 2 hours and 30 minutes to defeat the 8 bullets, largely due to the troublesome trigger drag they had used. Stain glanced at the 3 nomes they had brought along, noting their fatigue. Even beings like them could tire. He then turned to 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who was securely tying up the 8 bullets before teleporting them away to a lab. Stain mused that these individuals would soon become nomes themselves. As 𝐒𝐮𝐬 finished his task, Stain approached him, expressing concern about their leader's delay. 𝐒𝐮𝐬, with a knowing look, assured Stain that he was not worried. He explained that Tamura Shigaraki had planned for his battle against Kai Chisaki, and victory was already assured. Stain, however, was not concerned about that outcome. He acknowledged that while Tamura had strong convictions, he had noticed a shift in his demeanor. His eyes had reflected a dangerous intensity. Stain recalled his first encounter with Tamura, recognizing a younger version of himself in the boy's words. Yet, as they waited for the Hasaikai to arrive, he had seen that conviction morph into something more unsettling. It had awakened something within him, and he admitted to 𝐒𝐮𝐬 that those eyes had frightened him. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 reassured Stain that Tamura would not lose himself on his path, as he had something worth protecting. This anchor would prevent him from falling into despair. Stain pondered this notion, intrigued by what Tamura might hold dear. Suddenly, the ground shook, and a section of the floor cracked open. Tamura emerged, carrying a girl in his arms. He approached 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and handed the girl over just as Chisaki surfaced, elevated by his quirk. Tamura spoke gently to the girl, asking her to stay with 𝐒𝐮𝐬 for a while. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 complied, teleporting them away. Chisaki's voice rang out, filled with frustration, but Tamura simply chuckled, brushing dust off his shirt. He then turned to Stain, his eyes shining with hope rather than madness. Stain, inspired by 𝐒𝐮𝐬's words about Tamura's ability to rise above challenges, unsheathed his blades, ready for the next confrontation. At 4:40 p.m., concerned citizens of Hosu began calling the authorities, alarmed by the tremors beneath their feet. The emergency hotline was overwhelmed with calls, many expressing worry about the disturbances occurring right under their homes. Civilians and authorities alike were stunned when villains emerged from a building, causing it to collapse. As the dust settled, bystanders recognized the figures. Whispers spread through the crowd as they identified the nomes and Tamura Shigaraki from the news, along with Stain. Tamura expressed his annoyance at the situation, realizing that their target had escaped. He noted that news of the League of Villains would have reached hero agencies by now, and they had no way to contact 𝐒𝐮𝐬. He instructed Stain to meet at the rendezvous point but emphasized the need to split up for now. He commanded the nomes to only attack when necessary, and they dashed off into the chaos. Even though Tamura ordered his followers not to attack unnecessarily, he never instructed them to avoid causing damage to public and private properties. With that in mind, Stain dashed away, leaping through the alleys between the buildings, while Tamura made his way back to the collapsed structure, creating a path inside. 𝐮𝐸 stated they were heading to Hosu, prompting Shudo to question why they would go there since it wasn't within 𝐮𝐸's jurisdiction. Shudo had decided to intern at his father's agency as a form of punishment for his earlier actions involving Izuku. 𝐮𝐸 explained that the hero killer and the League of Villains had been sighted causing chaos in Hosu, and Ingenium's agency had requested assistance. With a resigned sigh, Shudo agreed to go. After receiving the news, Tensei and Team Ida 10 sprang into action to help evacuate civilians and assist those who had been injured, often due to their own recklessness. Tensei wondered if bringing Tenya along was a wise decision. Although he wanted to expose his younger brother to the realities of being a hero, the scale of the villain attack made him reconsider. However, he resolved that as long as Tenya stayed close, everything would be fine. When Tensei heard someone shout about the hero killer escaping, he realized it was Tenya chasing after 𝐼𝐻, a dangerous serial killer. Tensei rushed after his brother, feeling a surge of frustration. As the clock approached 5 p.m., Izuku helped a couple out of their car, urging them to head to safety. They thanked him as they moved away. Izuku then focused on the battle between Gang Orca and a Nomu that resembled the one from the USJ incident. This Nomu, while lacking bird features, had acid BLD and was proving difficult for Gang Orca to defeat. If only there were more water available. Activating his water 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐃 quirk, Izuku manipulated the water in the area, changing its state to vapor before directing it back to Gang Orca in liquid form. 𝐾𝐮𝐽 sensed the assistance but couldn't identify the source. He figured that whoever was helping must be an ally. The thought of a being created to defeat All Might made Izuku wonder if anything could truly rival that hero. 𝐾𝐮𝐽 slammed the black creature into the concrete, creating significant cracks. Breathing but relieved, he turned to Izuku, who was running toward him. 𝐾𝐮𝐽 asked if Izuku was alright, to which the boy confirmed he had evacuated the nearby area. 𝐾𝐮𝐽 noted that the epicenter of the League of Villains attack was deeper in the city and asked if Izuku was ready to help. Izuku took a deep breath, filled with determination, and affirmed his commitment to the mission. 𝐾𝐮𝐽 smiled at the boy's resolve. Meanwhile, Tenko could hear muffled noises from the surface as he walked through the underground. He felt frustrated for letting Chisaki escape, as his quirk could have been a valuable asset for Izuku. However, Tenko decided that acquiring 𝐼𝐻 was a sufficient success for the day. He suspected it was already dark outside and made his way to the rendezvous point, wondering how 𝐻𝐻 and the Nomus were faring. 𝐻𝐻 glared at the hero brothers as he prepared to attack. He was surprised when the younger brother, Tenya, spotted him amidst the chaos caused by the Nomus. The older brother scolded Tenya for pursuing the hero killer alone, calling it a foolish move. Tenya apologized, believing his brother would appreciate the effort. 𝐻𝐻 interrupted, mocking Tenya for being a show-off. He then warned Tensei to be stricter with his brother, suggesting that without guidance, Tenya might become like the fake heroes who sought fame and fortune. As 𝐻𝐻 launched an attack, he moved with incredible speed. Despite their armored costumes, the force of 𝐻𝐻's kicks sent the brothers reeling. He taunted them about their responsibilities to evacuate civilians, questioning why they were prioritizing him. Tensei's heart raced as he heard a blade puncture something, followed by Tenya's cries of pain. Tensei struggled to rise but was quickly knocked down by 𝐻𝐻, who stood over him, removing his helmet. He felt a burning sensation on his cheek before a trickle of red emerged from the fresh wound. 𝐻𝐻 regarded 𝐮𝐸um with a twisted admiration, acknowledging his heroism. He had saved countless lives and inspired others to strive for greatness. Even as a newcomer, he had quickly proven himself to be a worthy contender, comparable to All Might. However, 𝐻𝐻 had a lesson to impart to 𝐮𝐸um's brother, and he was determined to proceed without any further interruptions. As he liked his blade, he activated his quirk, rendering Tensei immobile. Tensei pleaded desperately, calling out for his brother, but his voice was drowned out by the impending threat. Izuku halted in his tracks, recognizing the voice calling for Tenya. Was that Tensei? Concerned, Gang Orca asked Izuku what was wrong. Izuku hesitated, unsure if he should reveal what he had heard. The voice was distant, but his quirk had allowed him to catch the cry for help. He informed Gang Orca about the scream, though he couldn't pinpoint its exact source. Gang Orca speculated that it might be someone trapped or in distress but noted that the area seemed peaceful at the moment. He asked if Izuku felt capable of handling the situation alone. Izuku nodded and dashed into the alleys as Gang Orca moved toward the center of the chaos. Activating his quirk, he closed his eyes and clapped his hands, allowing his abilities to create a mental map of the surroundings. The alleys twisted like a maze, but he felt confident navigating them. Suddenly, his heart raced as he spotted Tenya. Upon reaching a turn, he activated muscle augmentation and fortify on his legs, charging toward the notorious hero killer, who was responsible for the downfall of many pro heroes. With a fierce determination, Izuku shouted as he unleashed a powerful punch, sending Stain staggering back. Tensei, still immobilized, urged Izuku to rescue Tenya while he had the chance. Izuku hesitated, torn between his concern for Tensei and his commitment to saving Tenya. Tensei's plea resonated deeply within him, reminding him of his own struggles with loss. Stain taunted Izuku, suggesting he choose one brother to save, but Izuku stood firm, declaring that a hero's duty was to protect the happiness of others. Stain flinched at Izuku's words, sensing the weight of his conviction. Izuku continued, expressing his fear of losing those he cared about, vowing to save both brothers. Tensei was moved to tears, recalling the bond they shared. Stain, momentarily taken aback, recognized the fierce determination in Izuku's eyes, reminiscent of his own past. As Izuku launched another punch, Stain attempted to evade, but the force of the blow shattered the concrete around them. Stain's blades shattered against Izuku's tough skin, leaving him astonished. Izuku declared his intent to never forgive Stain, his resolve unwavering. In that moment, Stain felt a flicker of admiration for the young hero, silently urging him to hold on to those he loved and to never lose himself in the darkness. Later, Izuku felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Concerned, a friend placed a hand on his shoulder, prompting him to smile and assure them he was fine, despite feeling numb. Just then, footsteps echoed nearby, and both Tensei and Tenya tensed, but it was only 𝗏𝗏 who arrived, shocked to see Stain subdued. 𝗏𝗏 learned that Izuku had single-handedly defeated the hero killer but was now suffering from the toll of using his quirk at full strength. Despite Izuku's insistence that he was fine, 𝗏𝗏 insisted on carrying him, prioritizing their safety. As Izuku settled onto 𝗏𝗏's back, he asked how 𝗏𝗏 had found them. 𝗏𝗏 explained that he had recognized the shockwaves from Izuku's fighting style, leading him to their location. Izuku chuckled, knowing that Tenya's brother would likely be upset about the chaos they had encountered. When Tensei finished tying up Stain, the four of them started heading to the main streets where they would eventually reunite with the other pro heroes. Tenko pushed the metal door open to a roof deck, arriving at the rendezvous point. It was already past 6, 𝐾𝐮𝐬 should arrive any minute now. But where was Stain? The 𝗏𝗏s should have provided enough distraction. Tenko felt a shift in the air and immediately recognized 𝐾𝐮𝐬's presence. He asked if 𝐾𝐮𝐬 had seen Stain. 𝐾𝐮𝐬 replied that Stain was currently not in the vicinity. Tenko rolled his eyes beneath his mask, but something caught his attention. When he looked again, shock and anger filled his eyes as he saw Izuku, nearly asleep while being carried by 𝗏𝗏. Along with them were Tenya, Tensei, and Stain, who was tied up. The sight of Stain made Tenko even angrier. Just then, they heard the sound of wings flapping. 𝗏𝗏 glanced over at Izuku, who seemed exhausted and was fighting to stay awake. He asked if Izuku was still conscious. Izuku mumbled that he was barely awake and felt comfortable being carried by 𝗏𝗏. Tensei reassured him that they would get him to an ambulance soon for proper care. Izuku simply nodded. Suddenly, they heard the sound of wings again and turned to see a winged 𝗏𝗏 flying toward them. Tensei shouted for everyone to get down. They reacted too late, and the 𝗏𝗏 managed to grab Izuku. From a distance, Tenko watched in horror as the 𝗏𝗏 seized his little brother from his friends. He thought about the 𝗏𝗏's programming, to obey its MSTR and protect it at all costs. The 𝗏𝗏 recognized the heroes as enemies and Izuku as its MSTR, which was why it took the boy. The group was so focused on Izuku's sudden abduction that they failed to notice Stain escaping from his restraints using a hidden blade. With the 𝗏𝗏's BLD dripping onto Tensei's costume, Stain was able to paralyze the creature. Despite his earlier wounds, he maneuvered swiftly to catch Izuku. Just then, 𝗟𝗏 and 𝗟𝗏𝐿 arrived. 𝗟𝗏 asked if they had seen a villain. Tenya started to explain about Izuku but was interrupted by Stain's chilling voice, declaring that they were all fakes. The hero killer's presence shocked 𝗟𝗏𝐿 and 𝗟𝗏, and 𝗏𝐽 noticed Izuku on the ground behind Stain. Stain proclaimed that society was filled with fakes, heroes seeking fame and villains acting out of pettiness. He asserted that only a few, including All Might, were true to their cause, along with Izuku and Tomura. The heroes and trainees flinched, feeling the weight of Stain's powerful aura, which seemed to freeze them in place. Stain declared that he would gladly purge all the fakes to create an ideal world of heroes and villains. Suddenly it grew quiet. Izuku, lying on the ground, tried to open his eyes and saw Stain standing still. He would have reacted more if he had the strength, but he could only watch. Meanwhile, Tenko felt a wave of relief from atop the roof. He was unsure why the Nomu had grabbed Izuku, but he was grateful that Stain had acted when the heroes did not. It seemed Stain had fought against Izuku and lost, yet he had saved him. Did Stain see something in Izuku? Was it possible he had figured something out? Tenko decided he would think about it later. For now, he instructed 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to get Stain, indicating that they were done here. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 complied, leaving the heroes wide-eyed as they watched the black mist surround the hero killer and disappear with him. The next day, Izuku and Tenya were still at the hospital. Since Stain had not actually been caught, there were no news reports about him. Tensei and Kugo took the blame for Tenya and Izuku's reckless actions, resulting in no major repercussions for the young heroes in training, aside from a lecture from Chief Tsuragami. Afterward, Kugo and Tensei left to make their official reports about the incident, leaving Tenya and Izuku to rest at the hospital. Tenya was mostly fine but would need surgery to fix his injured arm. However, Izuku had suffered more serious injuries, having broken several bones. Izuku looked down at his arms, which were encased in casts. Tenya felt a pang of guilt as he watched his classmate in such a sad fit. It was his fault after all. He expressed his regret, but Izuku smiled and reassured him that he had chosen to save both Tenya and Tensei. He would not have forgiven himself if either had died. Tenya bit his lip, wanting to apologize again but knowing Izuku would deny him the chance to take the blame. Their attention was drawn to the sound of the door opening, revealing a bald, elderly man with unusual goggles, wearing a white coat. Tenya assumed he was a doctor. Izuku exclaimed in recognition, and Tenya asked if he knew the man. Izuku confirmed that he was a family friend and their doctor. The doctor explained that he had been sent by Izuku's father after receiving the call about Izuku's condition. He walked over to check on Izuku. The doctor chuckled, commenting that it was expected he would have to check on Izuku because of his quirk during his studies to become a hero. He noted that heroes always push themselves to their limits when facing powerful villains, even if it meant risking their own safety to save others. Tenya pondered the doctor's disdain for heroes, realizing that even Izuku's physician shared a critical view of them. For Izuku to want to become a hero even when he's surrounded by people who don't support them. Dr. Ujiko suddenly remembered something important. He mentioned that Izuku's brother wanted to talk to him and was likely waiting for their call. Unable to reach Izuku directly, he asked the doctor to call him once he arrived. The doctor took out his phone and began dialing Tenko's number. Handing the phone to Izuku, Dr. Ujiko activated the loudspeaker. Izuku anticipated that Tenko would be quite upset, especially after hearing about his injury. Finally, the call connected. Tenko's voice came through, filled with concern and frustration. He demanded to know what Izuku was doing in Hosu. Izuku explained that Ingenium had asked Gang Orca to come, and they had no idea the League of Villains would show up. Tenko expressed his dismay, stating that he had just left, and now Izuku was hurt because of his hero studies. He questioned whether he should have pulled Izuku out of those studies altogether. Izuku felt a wave of despair wash over him, fearing that this might be the end of his dream. Dr. Ujiko intervened, stating that it wasn't fair for Izuku to quit due to a coincidence. He reassured Tenko that Izuku was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The doctor emphasized that aspiring heroes must act like heroes, even if it means facing challenges along the way. Izuku nodded in agreement, though Tenko remained silent. Dr. Ujiko advised Izuku to avoid any further injuries. Tenko reluctantly agreed, but he made it clear that if Izuku got hurt again while under the supervision of his teachers, he would have to reconsider his place in hero studies. With that, he ended the call. Dr. Ujiko commented on Tenko's stubbornness, noting that he was just like his father. Izuku expressed his gratitude, and the doctor replied that he was merely saying what Hisashi would have said. Curious, Izuku asked 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 why his bones had broken this time when they had only weakened during his last full-power quirk usage. The doctor explained that since that time, Izuku's quirk had grown stronger, while his body had not kept pace. He warned that it would take many years before Izuku could handle his quirk as he had 2 years ago. Feeling disheartened, Izuku absorbed the doctor's words. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 recommended that he avoid using his full power for now and suggested considering a different quirk combination. The room fell silent for a moment, filled with an air of tension. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 announced that he would take his leave, leaving some medicine for Izuku to take after meals. He assured Izuku that he should be fully healed by the time he returned to school and expressed his hope to see him soon, but not too soon. Izuku smiled in response. A black portal opened as 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 stepped through. Tenko shot him a sidelong glance before standing up to face the doctor. He inquired about Stain's condition. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 informed him that Izuku had managed to injure Stain significantly, but he was currently in a coma and would likely recover, showcasing remarkable willpower. Tenko felt a mix of annoyance and concern, believing Izuku should never have been in that situation. He then asked about Izuku's condition, and 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 reassured him that Izuku would be fine, as he had left him some fast-healing pills. Tenko expressed his frustration over Izuku's stubbornness in using a quirk combination that mirrored All Might's, even though it was detrimental to him. He wished for Izuku to lead a normal and happy life, free from the burdens of their past. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 reminisced about Tenko's protective nature, recalling how he had felt similarly when the idea of training to become successors had first been mentioned. He believed Izuku was the best candidate to inherit Hisashi's quirk, especially with the right training. Tenko interrupted, warning 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐃𝐭 not to involve Izuku in any of their plans. He stood firm, but the doctor found his determination amusing. Just then, the television in the bar turned on, revealing Hisashi on video chat, commanding the attention of the 3 men in the room. His face was still mostly scarred, and he remained on life support. Training Eri to use her quirk properly would take time. Hisashi's voice was stern and serious as he addressed 𝐬𝐃𝐭, expecting him to return right away. Daruma merely scoffed at this demand. He then ordered 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸, who was acting as the bartender, to open a gate. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸 complied without hesitation. Tenko glared at the old man as he departed. Hisashi reminded Tenko to stop arguing with the doctor, emphasizing how much 𝐬𝐃𝐭 had done for their family. He pointed out that one day, Tenko would have to work with him, and it would be easier if they established friendly relations. Tenko retorted that he would start being friendly as soon as 𝐬𝐃𝐭 stopped eyeing Izuku. Hisashi, clearly annoyed, urged Tenko to cooperate with the doctor as well. With that, the video chat ended. Tenko sat at the counter, grimacing as he pounded it in frustration. He raked his fingers through his hair, making unintelligible sounds of annoyance. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸 observed as Tenko's frustration reached its peak before gradually subsiding. In a calmer tone, Tenko inquired about the new assignment he had given 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸 reported that he had found several individuals who met Tenko's criteria. Initially uninterested, they reconsidered after a peculiar video surfaced. Confused, Tenko asked what video 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸 was referring to. 𝗟𝗏𝐬𝐸 switched on the television and displayed the video, leaving Tenko wide-eyed at what he saw. It had been over a month since All Might chose Katsuki to be his successor. He had only possessed one for all for about a week, having received it after the sports festival. Katsuki's entire work study focused on getting used to the new, stronger firepower of his explosions. They had gone to the countryside, where it was less likely for him to accidentally harm anyone. He had to relearn how to control the output of his explosions, as even his usual weaker blasts now matched his former average strength. Along with the increased power of his quirk, he also experienced a boost in strength and speed, which fortunately took only a week to adjust to. However, he suspected that mastering his explosions would take months. Katsuki's arms began to ache from the exertion of using his quirk. All Might had told him he wanted to make him his successor, an offer of a lifetime. The chance to train under his idol and become the next symbol of peace was something he couldn't pass up. He didn't correct All Might's belief that he was a good candidate, even if he had acted out of a longing to prove he was better than those who ran away during a crisis. He acknowledged that he wasn't a good person, having bullied those he deemed weaker than himself, including Izuku when they were younger. Now, he was striving to be better, to prove himself worthy of All Might's legacy. Katsuki's attention was caught when 𝗀𝐻𝐻 mentioned the hero killer. He remembered the video circulating online featuring his classmates. Izuku, defensive, expressed surprise that the incident was public knowledge. 𝐼𝐶HOT explained that someone had uploaded a video of the night of the Hosu incident, though the authorities were unaware of who had done it. 𝗀𝐻𝐻 pulled out his phone to show the video, and Izuku's face turned pale as he watched. He confessed that he didn't remember much from that night, only that Stain had escaped. The thought of the Nomu almost getting away with him while he was unconscious sent shivers down his spine. Katsuki couldn't help but think that Izuku still sounded like the timid kid he had met years ago. Izuku quickly reassured everyone that he was fine, but Katsuki scoffed at his attempt to downplay his fear. Izuku flinched, looking away, while 𝐼𝐶HOT and Four Eyes shot daggers at Katsuki, who was trying to be nicer but still struggled to suppress his reactions. Shota Aizawa turned to the student behind him, noticing the dark purple-haired boy's nervousness. He assured the student that they would be placed as far away from each other as possible and that he just needed to avoid the other student to the best of his ability. As agreed, Shota entered the classroom to inform the class of the new arrangements. He explained that, except for Izuku, the class had been informed that ♀♬ would be placed under his supervision to determine whether he deserved to be transferred to hero studies. As their class had been one student short, it was decided that ♀♀ would be transferred to their class. The dark purple-haired boy stood outside the classroom, reflecting on All Might's words, which echoed in his mind. He clenched his fists in frustration. ♀♀ had been contemplating the pro-hero's advice, realizing he had been foolish. He felt anger toward those who viewed him as a villain simply because of his quirk, which was deemed villainous. He had always vowed to prove them wrong. However, after his battle against Izuku and All Might's guidance, he recognized that he had not been proactive. He had been overconfident in his quirk without working to improve his other abilities. Determined to show everyone that he could become a hero with his quirk, he reminded himself that heroes do not solely rely on their powers. During his time under Eraserhead, he had focused on building his physical strength and learning basic martial arts. Even his family had noticed the significant changes in him since then. When it was time for ♀♀ to enter the classroom, he complied and approached the front. He bowed and introduced himself once more, stating that he would be their classmate from that day forward. The next class for 1A was with All Might, featuring a rescue training race through Ground Gamma. The first group included Katsuki, ♀♀, Tsuyu, Siro, and Tenya. As the class speculated on who would win, opinions varied. Some believed Tsuyu had the advantage due to her agility, while others thought Hanta's quirk would give him an edge. Katsuki felt a sense of pressure, recalling the advice from Toshinori and Gran Torino to refrain from using his quirk until he regained full control. Denki suddenly asked ♀♀ about Aizawa's capture scarf, catching him off guard. ♀♀ explained that Aizawa had made one for him to include in his hero uniform, although he had yet to emastier it. Denki introduced himself, and after a brief exchange, he inquired about ♀♀'s previous encounter with Izuku. ♀♀ flinched at the question, realizing it was a sensitive topic. He dismissed Denki coldly as he put on his voice-changing mask, a gadget designed to help him fully utilize his quirk during missions. As the first group began their race, Tsuyu and Hanta quickly took the lead, while Tenya struggled with the parkour-style course. Despite being less agile than Tsuyu, ♀♀ impressed his classmates by navigating the training ground at a remarkable pace. However, Katsuki's performance was underwhelming. He was noticeably holding back and not using his quirk to its full potential. A memory from 5 years ago resurfaced in Izuku's mind, reminding him of the harsh words he had heard about those who possessed powerful quirks but chose not to use them. In the end, Hanta finished first, followed closely by Tsuyu, with Tenya in third place. Katsuki placed fourth, and ♀♀ came in last. As the 5 students caught their breath, Katsuki felt a piercing glare directed at him. He could guess who it was, recalling the same look he had received during the sports festival and from the older brother of a boy he had bullied years ago. The thought sent chills down his spine. Meanwhile, 𝗀𝐽 paced back and forth, pulling at his hair in frustration. He was anxious about a video that had surfaced, mentioning Izuku alongside his villain name. He feared the implications if anyone connected the dots. 𝗂𝐬 followed him, unable to intervene but tasked with watching over him. A knock at the door interrupted 𝗀𝐽's spiraling thoughts, and another knock only heightened his irritation. He shouted for the person to identify themselves. The voice from the other side introduced himself as 𝗟𝐼𝐴, explaining that he was waiting for permission to enter. 𝗀𝐽 let out a frustrated sound as he reached for his hand mask and sat down at the counter. 𝗂𝐬, sensing the cue, called for 𝗟𝐼𝐴 to enter. 𝗟𝐼𝐴 took a seat beside 𝗀𝐽 and casually asked if they had been fighting. 𝗀𝐽 bluntly dismissed 𝗟𝐼𝐴's attempt at casual conversation, stating it was none of his business. 𝗟𝐼𝐴 commented on 𝗀𝐽's hot temper and cold demeanor before presenting an A5 brown envelope containing lists and profiles of individuals interested in their league's recruitment. He remarked on the interesting mix of individuals, from high school delinquents to notorious criminals, and wondered if they had uploaded the promotional video. 𝗀𝐽 clenched his fist, struggling to contain his anger towards 𝗟𝐼𝐴. Fortunately, 𝗂𝐬 sensed the tension and intervened, pulling 𝗟𝐼𝐴 away. He apologized for 𝗀𝐽's attitude, explaining that it had not been a good day for him. 𝗟𝐼𝐴 shrugged it off, expressing pleasure in doing business with the League of Villains before leaving. Once 𝗟𝐼𝐴 was gone, 𝗀𝐽 removed his mask, his eyes filled with rage and madness as he vowed to 𝗂𝐬 that if he ever discovered who leaked that video, he would ensure they faced dire consequences. ☆SHINSO entered the bustling cafeteria, scanning the room for his former classmates from Class C, feeling more at ease with them. Upon spotting them, he raised his hand in greeting, and they waved back. With his bento in hand, he made his way over, but someone bumped into him, causing him to nearly drop his meal. Instinctively, he reached out to steady the person, a blonde boy who was boasting about their class's newfound popularity due to a video featuring Stain. Before he could finish, the boy was swiftly knocked unconscious by a ginger girl's quirk. ☆SHINSO felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him as he realized the commotion had drawn attention. The ginger girl apologized for her classmate's behavior and then froze upon noticing ☆SHINSO, who was equally taken aback. Their mutual shock left them momentarily paralyzed. Fortunately, Tenya intervened, pulling Izuku away from ☆SHINSO's grasp. ☆SHINSO opened his mouth to apologize but found no words came out. He turned away to retrieve his bento from the floor, feeling the weight of the cafeteria's gaze on him as he returned to Class C. Izuku, now seated with Tenya's help, reassured 𝗏𝗏 that he was fine after the incident. Taking a deep breath, he shifted the conversation to their plans for the upcoming final exams. His friends chimed in with their study strategies, leading to a light-hearted discussion. Itsuka, the ginger girl, asked Izuku if he was okay and if he needed to visit the clinic. He assured her he was fine, prompting her to express relief. She apologized again for Monoma's behavior, explaining the rivalry between their classes. Izuku responded positively, noting that rivalry could motivate them to improve and expressing hope for collaboration in the future. Intrigued, the group listened as Itsuka shared information about the practical exams, revealing that they might face robots similar to those in the entrance exam. She hoped this insight would help them prepare before bidding farewell to join her classmates. As the day came to a close, Aizawa dismissed the students, reminding them to avoid trouble and head straight home. However, the 1A students, initially ready to leave, returned to their seats. Izuku and Momo approached the teacher's table to discuss their upcoming final exams. Izuku began the meeting by addressing the group's concerns and mentioning Momo's suggestion to organize a study party. He read off the names of those who had expressed interest in joining. Momo encouraged anyone else who wanted to participate to approach her. Izuku then shared the news from Itsuka about the practical portion of the exams, suggesting they could benefit from training together. Momo proposed hosting a sleepover at Izuku's place for the week leading up to the exams, allowing them to utilize the training hall for practice. Excitement filled the room as the class discussed the study party and its potential, with Izuku confirming they could start as soon as their parents approved. Izuku had already called home earlier to request about 7 to 10 meals prepared. Achiko, Tenya, and Tsuyu had already expressed their longing to join, and Momo's parents had agreed to her going. Momo suggested that their chauffeur could stop by their places so they could all go together. It felt as if they were being overwhelmed by their friend's generosity, but they couldn't possibly be upset with such kindness. ― glanced at the group of classmates gathered around the two class leaders. He frowned, stood up, grabbed his bag and headed toward the door. The entire class fell silent the moment he opened it, perhaps realizing that he was also part of their class. Regardless, he had no longing to join that study group. He preferred to grow stronger on his own. With only 2 days left until their final exams, the study party had yielded positive results, and it was clear that everyone in Class 1A would pass. Another session was scheduled for that evening at the Midoriya household. Izuku suddenly exclaimed, causing his friends to pause. He rummaged through his bag, his expression growing more anxious as he searched. He realized he had forgotten his hero journal in the classroom and decided he needed to retrieve it. Despite Achiko's offer to accompany him, he insisted on going alone, assuring them he would meet them at the gate. As he walked through the hallway back to the classroom, Izuku berated himself for being forgetful. He wondered if the stress of the upcoming exams was getting to him. The thought of going camping with friends and training for hero studies excited him, and he couldn't bear the idea of missing out. Meanwhile, in Aizawa-sensei's office, ― and Aizawa were having one of their regular meetings. These meetings had become less frequent after hero studies ended, resembling the secret discussions All Might had with Katsuki. Most students were unaware that ― often met with Aizawa to discuss the latter's concerns. As Izuku walked past, he overheard a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. Aizawa questioned ― about why he hadn't been using his quirk, suggesting he should be training with it. ― responded that he believed training his body was more important than provoking others to respond to his quirk. Aizawa pressed further, hinting that it might be related to Izuku. ― assured Aizawa that he could handle the practical exam, and as he left the office, Izuku quickly hid around a corner, his mind racing. In class, Aizawa announced that during the practical exams, students would face their teachers. Shock and worry spread through Class 1A as they realized they would be fighting pro-heroes instead of robots. Aizawa reassured them that they would be given handicaps, and the principal, Nizu, explained that due to recent villain attacks, the exams needed to be updated. Each pair would face an assigned teacher, with 2 ways to pass: handcuffing the teacher or escaping the battlefield. When a student asked if they could choose their partner, the class fell silent, realizing the implications of such a request. Aizawa decided to entertain the idea and asked Izuku who he would like to be paired with. Izuku confidently stated he wanted to be paired with ―. The room fell into a tense silence as everyone turned to ―, who appeared taken aback. The teachers exchanged confused glances, questioning Izuku's intentions. Aizawa approached Izuku, who remained bowed, exuding an intimidating presence that made the students wary. Izuku's classmates expressed their concern, recalling the previous incident involving ―. Despite their worries, Izuku remained resolute, nodding in affirmation of his choice. Aizawa, recognizing the illogical nature of Izuku's decision, prepared to address the situation. Giving his best at the recommendations exam, then immediately backing down in his first test in class was a puzzling decision for Izuku. Shota stood right in front of him, who was still bowing, and remarked that this may be the most illogical choice he had ever made. Izuku winced at the comment. Suddenly, the sound of fast-moving cloth surrounded him, and before he realized it, Shota had carried him away from the group. The principal, noticing their departure, continued with the announcements. It didn't take long for Aizawa-sensei to return with Izuku, who was now walking freely. By the time they came back, the pairs had already been announced and formed. The only ones left without partners were Izuku, who had just returned, ―, and the would-be partners of the two. Shota walked over to Nizu and whispered something to the principal. After a moment of uncertainty, Nizu was convinced. He called out the names, announcing that Izuku Midoriya and Shinso Hitoshi would pair up to face Aizawa-sensei. Izuku clenched his fists and bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude for the opportunity. 𝗀𝐻, wanting to voice his concerns, held back, knowing Izuku was within earshot. They just had to beat Aizawa-sensei. A few minutes before their test began, Izuku took a deep breath and exhaled, wearing a serious expression. He drew in a few more deep breaths to psych himself up. Nearby, 𝗀𝐻 was putting on his own mask, noticing his partner drawing multiple slow breaths. He wondered what Izuku was planning. A troubling memory flashed in 𝗀𝐻's mind, causing him to instinctively grab his neck, checking to ensure those hands were not there. He grimaced, recalling how unexpected it was for Izuku to be his little brother. The bandages had saved him, but what would happen next time? The thought filled him with dread. After the sports festival, he felt as if he was always being watched, as if at any moment, those hands would wrap around his throat and erase his very existence. Making a deal with that man had been a mistake. 𝗀𝐻 vividly remembered their first meeting, where the gentleman had looked striking with light blue hair styled back and dressed in fine black clothing. After the entrance exam results were released, 𝗀𝐻 had failed to qualify for hero studies, his quirk deemed unsuitable for combat against robots. The man had offered him a deal, promising that all he had to do was give him what he wanted when he asked for it. 𝗀𝐻 still wanted to enter UA's hero program with his own abilities. It wouldn't have felt fair otherwise. But now, with a spot opening in 1A due to a student being expelled for misconduct, he had a chance to pursue his dream. Yet now it all felt pointless. After finally getting the chance to be a hero, he had made a grave mistake and hurt his little brother. He feared being exposed as a traitor the next time they met. Suddenly, 𝗀𝐻 flinched as a hand landed on his shoulder. His eyes widened and his face paled. Slowly, he turned to see the owner of the hand, who wore an awkward smile. It was a smile that had clearly gone through much deliberation, one that hinted at past suffering. Izuku spoke, and 𝗀𝐻 was shocked. This was likely the first time Izuku had addressed him, and despite the fear that had once lingered, his voice was warm and steady, a stark contrast to how he spoke to his older brother. Izuku apologized, explaining that he had overheard 𝗀𝐻's conversation with Aizawa-sensei. He expressed regret for how his actions had affected 𝗀𝐻, bowing deeply in apology. 𝗀𝐻 was taken aback, left speechless by Izuku's sincerity. Izuku continued, sharing that he had spoken with 𝗀𝐻's former classmates about his quirk. He straightened up and declared that 𝗀𝐻 had an amazing quirk. 𝗀𝐻's eyes widened in surprise. Izuku countered the negative comments 𝗀𝐻 had heard over the years, insisting that his quirk was truly remarkable. He admitted that they hadn't spent much time together, and he regretted closing himself off out of fear. As a hero, Izuku believed no one should feel compelled to stop using their quirk. He reached out to 𝗀𝐻, asking him to cast aside his fear and team up to defeat Aizawa-sensei. 𝗀𝐻 was in shock, not expecting such a heartfelt gesture from his little brother. He looked at Izuku's outstretched hand and sighed, scratching the back of his neck. Finally, he accepted Izuku's hand, and a smile broke through his mask. He agreed to work together to take down their teacher, smirking as he added that they should not go too far. Izuku laughed nervously, relieved and excited about their newfound partnership. Izuku's words resonated in 𝗱𝗏's mind as he perched atop a utility pole near the escape gate. He recognized the potential in the young boy, thinking that Izuku certainly had what it took to be a hero. However, his thoughts turned to Tomura Shigaraki, Izuku's brother. 𝗱𝗏 pondered the contradictions in Tomura's actions. If he truly opposed heroism, why would he allow his brother to attend UA? Was it a ploy to gather intelligence? It seemed unlikely. During the initial breach, Tomura had calmed the students, even injuring himself in the process. He had also been present during the USJ attack, where he had struck at his own brother as if he were just another villain. Had he vanished during that incident, 𝗱𝗏 would have concluded he was a spy. But Izuku remained blissfully unaware of his brother's identity, attending UA as any ordinary student would. 𝗱𝗏 surveyed the suburban-style training ground, contemplating the strategies the students would devise. Izuku reported that an obstacle stood directly in front of their escape route. 𝗀𝐻 marveled at the realistic interior of the house, complete with furniture and appliances, and wondered about the school's budget. But more pressing was his curiosity about Izuku's skills. He asked Izuku how a wealthy student knew how to pick locks. Izuku chuckled nervously, explaining that a servant had taught him. 𝗀𝐿 inquired if Izuku had a plan, assuming he had devised one since he had chosen to partner with him. Izuku's awkward response revealed that he hadn't fully thought through his strategy. He admitted to still seeing dark figures, which he referred to as ghosts, though they were less troubling than before. Despite the awkward atmosphere, Izuku expressed his relief at their newfound friendship, which prompted a forced smile from 𝗀𝐿 beneath his mask. The silence lingered until Izuku shifted the focus back to their plan. 𝗀𝗱 was determined to guard the escape route, fully aware of the quirks possessed by the two aspiring heroes. He had the advantage of experience, having trained 𝗀𝐿 during internships, where 𝗀𝐿 felt like a child trying to challenge an adult. However, 𝗀𝗱's speed and agility were compromised for the test, which was something Izuku and 𝗀𝐿 were counting on. Using his power limb on his legs, Izuku leaped from the roof toward their escape. 𝗀𝗱 quickly noticed him and activated his quirk, shrinking Izuku's legs and sending him crashing down. To 𝗀𝗱's surprise, Izuku managed to grab his capture scarf, pulling him down as well. They both landed safely, and Izuku wrapped the cloth around his arm to prevent 𝗀𝗱 from escaping. 𝗀𝗱 smirked, confident that holding him would not be easy. He charged at Izuku, delivering a kick that the boy deflected with surprising skill. Izuku countered with a kick of his own, narrowly avoided by 𝗀𝗱, who instinctively distanced himself. 𝗀𝗱 realized that despite canceling Izuku's quirk, the boy was still employing impressive martial arts techniques. As the two exchanged blows, 𝗀𝗱 kept his eyes open, aware that if Izuku regained his quirk during their skirmish, it would spell defeat for him. However, 𝗀𝗱's injuries from the USJ attack had diminished the time he could maintain his quirk. This was the opening Izuku and 𝗀𝐿 had been waiting for. As 𝗀𝗱's vision began to blur, he heard Izuku's voice declare their victory. The last thing he saw before everything faded was Izuku's confident smirk. From behind a nearby building, 𝗀𝐿 emerged, expressing disbelief that Izuku had expected him to fight during the sports festival, given his martial arts skills. Izuku chuckled as 𝗀𝐿 approached to handcuff Aizawa-sensei. Their plan had never been for 𝗀𝐿 to escape while Izuku distracted Aizawa. Instead, they aimed to capture him by using 𝗀𝐿's quirk to incapacitate him. After Recovery Girl announced their victory, 𝗀𝐿 snapped their teacher out of his brainwashed state. Upon regaining consciousness, 𝗀𝗱 smiled proudly at the two boys, commending their efforts. Meanwhile, four students knelt in despair, lamenting their failure. Achiko, Yuga, Denki, and Mina expressed their dismay at not being able to attend the training camp. Mina cried out, wishing her friends well without her, while Achiko felt the weight of being the only one to fail. Denki cursed their luck, and 𝗀𝗱's commanding voice cut through their lamentations, urging them to calm down and cease their antics. The four students quickly got on their feet. 𝗀𝗱 expressed his disappointment that four of them had failed the practical tests, despite everyone passing the written ones. He paused for a moment before flashing an eerie smile and announcing that the four would be attending extra activities during the training camp, promising a challenging experience. The four failed students were shocked and exclaimed in disbelief that they would still be going. Nizu confirmed that failure would mean additional training to motivate them to do their best. The entire Class 1A beamed at the news, though 𝗀𝗱 warned them not to inform Class B of the changes, knowing they had shared information with them. The class responded affirmatively. Before changing into their uniforms, Toru suggested taking a picture to commemorate the end of their first semester in hero studies. 𝗀𝗱 questioned the need for it, but Toru insisted it was important. Momo and Izuku agreed, and Toru excitedly set up the timer. Izuku gathered his friends, Achiko, Tenya, 𝗀𝗱, and the newest addition, 𝗀𝐿. 𝗀𝐿 was initially surprised, but Izuku's smile eased his worries. As the timer counted down, they all posed together. Meanwhile, Tenko emerged from a room in the hideout without his mask, his hair unstyled. Kurohige introduced the two new recruits brought by Jiren. Tenko frowned, feeling annoyed, and took his usual seat. He prompted the newcomers to introduce themselves. One of them, a girl named Himiko Toga, expressed her longing to make the world easier to live in and idolized 𝐻𝐿. 𝗏𝐿 thought about her reputation as a suspect in a series of murders. The other recruit, a man covered in burn scars, introduced himself with skepticism. He questioned 𝗏𝐿's status as Tamura Shigaraki, the son of the infamous 𝐿, and expressed his lack of impression. 𝗏𝐿 smirked and retorted that he had no intention of impressing someone who had not achieved anything. The man responded, pointing out 𝗏𝐿's irritability and inability to keep 𝗏𝐿 awake. 𝗏𝐿 scowled and clarified that he was inheriting his father's will, not 𝗏𝐿's, and insulted the man, calling him a failure. This remark pushed the man to the edge, and in a flash he was in front of 𝗏𝐿, surrounded by blue flames. Just as he was about to strike, 𝗟𝗏 intervened with a portal, preventing the attack. He urged the man to calm down, and 𝗏𝐿 couldn't help but laugh. After a moment, 𝗏𝐿 welcomed the two recruits, admitting he needed to let off some steam. The man composed himself and introduced himself as 𝗟𝗶𝐻𝗸. 𝗏𝐿 grinned, pleased with the new name. 𝗏𝐿 then inquired about their pet, and 𝗟𝗏 informed him that he was at the Kiashi Ward shopping mall, buying supplies for boot camp. A portal opened, and 𝗏𝐿 donned a black jacket and hood before grabbing something from behind the counter. He cheerfully wished the new recruits an enjoyable stay as he left through the portal. At the Kiashi Ward shopping mall, Class 1A had split into smaller groups to gather supplies. Izuku and 𝗪𝐿 were among them. 𝗪𝐿 noticed that Izuku hadn't bought anything and asked if he planned to. Izuku explained that their servants had already completed the errands, and he was there to spend time with his classmates. 𝗪𝐿 found it sweet, and they continued walking until 𝗪𝐿 suddenly asked about the ghosts, surprising Izuku. After a moment of shock, Izuku smiled and reassured him that the ghosts were gone, noting that their presence had diminished the more time he spent with 𝗪𝐿. 𝗪𝐿 was pleased to hear this. As they wandered, Izuku caught the scent of coffee and suggested they visit a nearby cafe. 𝗪𝐿 hesitated, concerned about the price and the long line, but Izuku insisted it would be his treat. 𝗪𝐿 watched as Izuku went to order, feeling a bit envious of his wealth. While waiting, 𝗪𝐿 looked for a place to sit and was startled when someone draped an arm around him. Annoyed, he turned to see Tamura, his eyes widening in fear. Tamura suggested they find a seat together, and 𝗪𝐿 had no choice but to follow, keeping a wary eye on Tamura's hands as they walked. After a few minutes, they found a vacant bench, and Tamura complimented 𝗪𝐿's outfit. It was not like the usual encounters. 𝗪𝐿 attempted to engage in casual conversation to calm his nerves, even if just a little. 𝗏𝐿 revealed that his brother was nearby and that he needed to keep his presence a secret since he was supposed to be abroad. They quickly moved to the matter at hand. Without hesitation, 𝗏𝐿 informed 𝗪𝐿 that the location of the boot camp would likely change, as the heroes would take precautions to conceal it from them, possibly using decoy buses. 𝗪𝐿, feeling anxious, asked what he needed to do. 𝗏𝐿 smiled and produced two small button-like objects from his jacket pocket. He instructed 𝗪𝐿 to keep one transmitter on him at all times and to attach the other to 𝗏𝐿RB on the third night of the boot camp. When 𝗪𝐿 questioned why he needed to target 𝗏𝐿, 𝗏𝐿's aggravated tone made it clear that further inquiry was unwelcome. 𝗪𝐿 couldn't shake his unease about 𝗏𝐿, especially as he reflected on how different 𝗏𝐿 was from his brother, Izuku. The thought of Izuku crossed his mind, and he hesitated to speak his name. The moment he did, he felt a wave of 𝗏𝐿's intense presence wash over him, as if a predator had locked onto its prey. 𝗏𝐿's piercing gaze met 𝗪𝐿's, and he lifted his hand to grip 𝗪𝐿's chin, his words a chilling mix of a request and a threat. He made it clear that Izuku was unaware of their conversation, and he expected 𝗪𝐿 to ensure it remained that way. Suddenly, a voice called out for 𝗪𝐿 from a distance. Seizing the opportunity, 𝗏𝐿 departed, unaware that it was his little brother who had called out. 𝗪𝐿 was left shaken, burying his face in his hands and taking deep breaths to steady himself. When Izuku approached, he asked if 𝗪𝐿 was all right and who the man was. 𝗪𝐿 quickly dismissed the encounter as unimportant and changed the subject, grabbing a cup and drinking its contents, leaving Izuku puzzled. He suggested they join the rest of the class, and despite his confusion, Izuku agreed. Later, 𝗀𝐮 was jolted awake by a familiar voice in his dreams, causing him to gasp for air. The memory of Tenko's words haunted him, solidifying the fear he felt. When Izuku checked on him, 𝗀𝐮 apologized for his restless night, brushing off Izuku's concerns about his appearance. Izuku informed 𝗀𝐮 that they were approaching a stop and that Aizawa-sensei had instructed everyone to disembark. As they exited the bus, Aizawa acknowledged their arrival, signaling two women to introduce themselves. The moment was interrupted by Izuku's enthusiastic exclamation about the wild pussycats, a renowned hero team specializing in mountain rescues. However, Pixie Bob's stern glare quickly silenced him, prompting a flurry of apologies from Izuku. Mandalay then shifted the focus back to the task at hand, explaining that they would be staying a few kilometers away and that lunch would be served in 3 hours. She encouraged the students to use their quirks to reach their destination quickly. Before Izuku could clarify any details, the ground beneath them softened, sending the students tumbling down the mountainside. Pixie Bob reminded them to utilize their quirks as they descended. 𝗀𝐮 expressed frustration about forgetting his capture scarf, but Izuku, using one of his quirks, sensed movement in the forest. As they rushed into the woods, Izuku led 𝗀𝐮 down a different path from the others, calling for Tenya, Shudo, and Achiko to join them. Above, the pro-heroes observed the students charging into the forest, and Mandalay realized she had forgotten to mention the forest's name. Shota reassured her that in the field, they would need to be prepared for anything. Mandalay cautioned Koda, the young boy with them, to stay away from the cliff's edge. As the group ran, Shudo inquired about their destination. Izuku explained that Pixie Bob's quirk allowed her to create earth beasts, estimating that there were likely several in the area. This route is longer than the one the rest of the class is taking, Achiko observed. Izuku confirmed that the others were taking the shortest path, one guarded by beasts. He explained that if they could go around them, it would work to their advantage. Tenya praised Izuku for his good thinking. Mina exclaimed in surprise at the appearance of the creatures. Momo reminded everyone that Izuku had mentioned them earlier, and they quickly realized that Izuku, Shudo, and Tenya were missing. Momo urged everyone to focus, emphasizing the need to defeat the beasts to move forward. Half of the group formed teams with their friends. Momo directed Koji to use his Ani voice to control the beasts, but he explained that it wasn't working because they weren't animals. She then asked Mizo and Kyoka to assess the situation. They quickly used their quirks to determine that there were about 7 beasts, excluding the 2 that the others had just subdued. Kyoka started to report that the others were handling the 4 on both sides when 3 more beasts suddenly appeared in front of them. Momo gritted her teeth and commanded Tsuchan and Hanta to try to immobilize the creatures. Mizo interrupted, stating that he was receiving a message from Izuku, who instructed them to throw the beasts up so that he and his friends could handle the rest. Momo quickly relayed the order, directing Mina, Kyoka, and Toru to distract the beasts while Tsuchan and Hanta got to work. Acting as decoys, Mina, Kyoka, and Toru ran around the beasts, drawing their attention while Hanta used his tape to bind them. Tsuyu then lifted Hanta, and together they ascended into the trees, preparing to launch the beasts into the air. A few meters away, Izuku's group had Achiko perched in a tree as a lookout. When she saw the 3 beasts sent flying by Momo's group, she alerted those below her. Shudo wasted no time, creating a heaven-piercing ice wall for Tenya to ride. Izuku activated his quirks on his legs, and together with Shudo, they leaped toward the beasts. In mid-air, Izuku propelled Shudo forward, and Tenya, having gained enough momentum, shot toward the creatures. With a powerful strike, the 3 of them took down the remaining beasts, landing safely in front of Momo's group. After finally exiting the beast forest, Class A was exhausted, hungry, and out of breath, with some students collapsing to the ground. Pixie Bob called out to them from a distance, offering food. The mere mention of food revived the students, and they rushed toward Pixie Bob with renewed energy, almost overwhelming the pro-hero. Once they began eating, they returned to their usual selves, celebrating their victory. "This is so delicious," one student exclaimed, while another felt revitalized. Mandalay, sitting beside the female students, remarked that they had expected the class to arrive around midnight. 𝗃𝐲𝐵 commended them for handling her clay beasts effectively. She then inquired about the green-haired boy who had interrupted their introduction. Everyone turned to Izuku, who flinched at the attention. 𝗃𝐲𝐵 acknowledged Izuku's quick thinking in warning his classmates about her quirk and planning a surprise attack. Izuku explained that he had only realized there were earth beasts after they had been sent down and prioritized getting 𝗟𝐿 out of harm's way before organizing their attack. 𝗃𝐲𝐵 pointed out that it seemed he had left his classmates to fend for themselves, which made Izuku freeze momentarily. He quickly clarified that he trusted his classmates to handle the beasts and that Momo was there to coordinate their efforts. 𝗃𝐲𝐵 recognized Momo as an impressive leader and asked where she was. Momo raised her hand and bowed her head in gratitude. As Izuku continued eating, 𝗏𝗏𝐿 approached him, asking about his quirk. Izuku hesitated but eventually explained that it was called Power Limb, a type of strengthening quirk. 𝗏𝗏𝐿 noted that it seemed similar to her own, given how he had cooperated with Momo's group from a distance. Ichigo clarified that it was thanks to 𝗏𝗏𝐿's quirk that Izuku was able to relay instructions. 𝗏𝗏𝐿 pressed further, questioning how Izuku had known the circumstances of their group. Caught off guard, Izuku stammered that he simply assumed Momo would manage, regardless of the number of beasts or participants. 𝗏𝗏𝐿 acknowledged his response just as Aizawa-sensei emerged from the building, instructing them to finish eating and bring their bags to their rooms. He reminded them that there was also a hot spring available for relaxation, as they would be busy the following day. After finishing their meal, Izuku and his friends made their way to where Aizawa-sensei had indicated their bags were, stretching as they walked. Izuku reflected on how it had been a while since he had participated in forest training, recalling how exhilarating yet exhausting it was. ♯ asked how forest training worked, and Izuku explained that it was similar to this experience but involved outrunning Maki, a friend of his father with a mutant quirk that made him look like a mountain man. As they approached the building's entrance, Izuku noticed a little boy watching their classmates eat with a scowling expression, reminding him that he had seen the boy earlier at the stop. Izuku wondered if the child was the son of one of the pussycats as he approached him. He introduced himself, asking if the child's parent was a member of the pussycats. The boy frowned at him and, sensing something, quickly backed away just in time to avoid a punch aimed at him. Unfortunately, Izuku, fatigued, lost his balance and fell onto the ground. He expressed his surprise at the boy's actions, which caught the attention of the other students and pro-heroes nearby. The boy dismissed Izuku with disdain, stating he had no intention of being nice to someone who aspired to be a hero before walking away. ♯ helped Izuku to his feet, while 𝗏𝗏𝐿 rushed over to apologize. Izuku reassured her that it was fine and that no harm was done, but as he walked with his friends, he couldn't shake off the boy's harsh words. He pondered the boy's apparent hatred for heroes. Later, at the hot springs, the students relaxed in the soothing water, enjoying the relief it provided their tired bodies. Izuku, who hadn't been in a hot spring for years, felt blissful and nearly drifted off to sleep until Tenya pulled him up, reprimanding him for his carelessness. ♯ commented on the idea of Izuku's family owning a hot springs resort, to which Izuku explained that his father and brother had discouraged the idea, fearing it would make him too comfortable and hinder his progress. ♯ realized the implications of Izuku's family ties, knowing that his father and brother were infamous villains. He curiously asked why they allowed Izuku to join the hero program, given their apparent disdain for heroes. Izuku, looking puzzled, admitted he had never considered it deeply, thinking it was simply because he had persistently expressed his longing to become a hero. He reminisced about his earliest memory of telling his family about his dream, recalling a moment in an improvised All Might costume. His father had hesitated but still smiled and encouraged him. Izuku shared that although his family had mixed feelings about his aspirations, he was grateful for their support, especially receiving a recommendation letter from UA. ♯ felt a pang of sympathy for Izuku, realizing that one day he might have to confront the truth about his family and the potential conflict it could create for his dreams. The thought troubled him, knowing that circumstances could force someone to abandon their aspirations. Unbeknownst to them, Koda had been listening intently from a nearby wall, leaning forward to catch every word. In his eagerness, he lost his balance and fell, but a sudden clap echoed, propelling him back up. In that moment he caught a glimpse of Izuku, the very person he had tried to strike earlier. However, as he reached the peak of his ascent, he accidentally glanced over the wall into the girl's side, causing him to faint just as Izuku caught him midair. Izuku felt relieved to have caught him and decided to take Koda to the Pussycats. In Mandalay's office, Izuku gently placed Koda on the couch. He learned that Koda was Mandalay's nephew, not her son. Curious about Koda's parents, Izuku asked about their absence, only to find out that they had tragically passed away while serving as heroes. Mandalay explained that to the world, they were heroes, but to Koda, they had abandoned him for their duties. Izuku felt a wave of empathy wash over him, understanding why Koda harbored such resentment toward heroes. He reflected on his own family dynamics, noting that his brother's lack of a quirk had limited his opportunities, which might have contributed to their negative views on heroes. He clenched his fists, acknowledging that while some people might harbor resentment toward heroes, it was heartbreaking to think that a child like Koda should have to bear such feelings. "Come on, young heroes, it's time for your training," Pixie Bob called out, her voice echoing through the early morning air. The sudden sound jolted the boys from their slumber, sending them rushing out of their rooms, except for one. Pixie Bob approached the greenette, urging him to wake up. "Hey, it's time for training," she insisted, moving closer. The greenette merely turned to his other side, pulling the blanket over himself. "Damn it, Tenko. It's 5 a.m. Training starts at 7, he mumbled, leaving Pixie Bob momentarily speechless. Just then, Aizawa-sensei appeared behind her, his frown deepening. Izuku, who had hoped to return to peaceful sleep, found himself ensnared in Aizawa's capture scarf, still wrapped in his blanket, now fully awake. "Training starts at 5. Unless you want to skip breakfast and train on an empty stomach, then be my guest," Aizawa stated flatly. Izuku stuttered in response. "Yes, sir. I mean no, sir. I wish to eat first." "Good," Aizawa replied as he began to walk out of the room, dragging the still-bound Izuku along with him. "This is okay. I guess," Izuku thought to himself. It wasn't okay. Now it was 5:30, and Izuku remained bound in Aizawa-sensei's capture scarf. He had to eat in this uncomfortable position while some classmates, especially ♯, laughed at his predicament. Tenya added insult to injury, playfully chastising him as they ate. "Before we begin, may I ask what kind of training you all think you're going to undergo?" Aizawa-sensei asked after the students finally lined up. After a moment of silence, he called out, "Kaminari." The blonde flinched at the sound of his name. "Isn't it the same as the training we go through at school? Only much stricter." Denki managed to respond, though it lacked confidence. Aizawa sighed in disappointment. "Tell me, how much do you think you've progressed?" He then called out, "Yaoyorozu." "Sir, compared to before we started at UA, we've definitely gained experience and grown, as seen during yesterday's exercise. We were able to coordinate more efficiently," Momo began, but Aizawa interrupted. "How about your quirks?" he asked, catching Momo off guard. "Compared to your first day when you had that quirk test, how much have your quirks grown?" Aizawa continued. Momo struggled to find an answer. "That is, through all that you've experienced during your first semester, you've definitely improved mentally and technically. However, your quirk growth is lacking," Aizawa explained. "In this training camp, you will work to enhance your quirks." Aizawa's expression turned serious. "Be prepared because we will put you through the ringer." A chill ran down the spines of the entire 1A class. As Shota observed his class disperse to their stations, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Aizawa-sensei." Turning to the greenette, Shota said, "You're a different case from the rest since you've already unlocked the full potential of your quirk." The greenette immediately began stretching and warming up, as Shota assumed he always did during his training sessions at home. "But that's where the problem lies," Shota continued, piquing Izuku's interest. He pulled out a piece of paper. "From what your brother told me and what is written here from your doctor, it appears you might have mstread your quirk prematurely." Izuku's confusion deepened. "But sensei, we've already tried everything to help my body adjust to full power. Nothing has worked." Shota frowned. From what I understand from these notes, you've trained your quirk ever since it manifested, correct? Yes. Most of your training focused on using your quirk? Yes. Yes. And after discovering the drawbacks of your quirk, you trained with a weaker power to help your body adjust over time, correct? Yes. Then tell me, have you tried training just your body occasionally? Izuku was taken aback. No, I don't think so. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 sighed. The problem with your approach is that you're rushing. Do you know how long it took me to master my capture scarf and integrate it into my fighting style? If I remember correctly, 6 years, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 interrupted. And not once did I rush it because some things shouldn't be hurried. Izuku felt a sense of enlightenment wash over him. For your training, I want you to sprint, do push-ups, climb, whatever you can do around here, but don't use your quirk, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 instructed. Izuku took a deep breath and responded with determination, yes, sir. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 couldn't help but smile as he watched the boy run, filled with hope that one day he might be able to use his full power again. Now then, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 turned around to address the student standing behind him, whose own capture cloth floated and tensed. With a swift kick, the 𝗟𝗶𝗸 was sent flying several meters away. He struggled to get up, catching his breath. I know I just advised your new friend to take it slow with training his body, but that advice doesn't apply to you, Izawa told him. Compared to the rest of the class, most of whom are halfway through their lap, you've only just begun the race, still a few feet from the starting line, Izawa explained as he approached the 𝗟𝗶𝗸. If you plan on obtaining your provisional hero license next semester with them, I suggest you pick up the pace. I know that. ☚ shouted as he charged toward his teacher once more, determined to improve. He unleashed a flurry of punches, kicks, and his scarf, but Izawa effortlessly dodged each attack. After ☚'s relentless assault, Izawa simply kicked him away, and the ☚ continued. After the 45th charge, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 finally remarked, maybe we should get you an easier opponent. Someone you might be able to catch up with. In the meantime, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 advised ☚ to work on his speed and stamina as he walked away. ☚ was left breathing, wiping the sweat from his face. He recalled having to outrun Maki in the forest, which reminded him of Izuku's story from the previous day, sparking an idea. He began to search for the blue pussycat. A few hours later, the entire 1B class was walking through the forest, finally nearing their destination. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 exclaimed in frustration upon realizing that 1A had already arrived. Vlad King explained that while they were walking and talking, 1A was likely already engaged in the rigorous training that awaited them. Itsuka expressed curiosity about how only a few pro heroes could manage the training for so many students. Vlad reassured them that the Pussycat's quirks were well suited for covering large areas and managing multiple people, noting that Pixie Bob could easily manipulate the earth to create excellent training partners, just like the one running toward them at that moment. As Vlad spoke, the ground trembled, and they heard a voice yell for them to move. They saw the newest addition to 1A sprinting toward them at top speed. Unable to react quickly enough, the 𝗟𝗶𝗸 jumped over them, stepping on 𝐼𝐻𝐬 to extend his jump, much to the blonde's dismay. Moments later, an earth beast leaped over them, prompting everyone to duck in surprise. Vlad noted that ☚ was clearly working on his stamina and agility. He encouraged the students, hinting that they hadn't seen anything yet. When they finally reached the training site, it was a sight to behold, students pushing themselves to their limits. Some were visibly struggling, while others were on the verge of tears, their bodies pleading for a break. What caught the attention of some in 1B was a certain greenette atop a nearly 50-meter-high pillar of earth, suching between his hands every few seconds while performing a handstand, sweat glistening on his exposed torso. Concerned murmurs arose about the safety of such a feat. Vlad's voice cut through their worries, instructing them to join the training. After what felt like an eternity, their first day of training finally came to an end. Complaints filled the air as students expressed their exhaustion and frustration. The combined groans of both classes nearly made the pro heroes laugh. Mandalay, using her quirk, urged them to stay alert, revealing that they still had one more task to complete. The students reacted in unison, bewildered by the unexpected announcement. Mandalay smiled and explained that they needed to cook their own food. The mere mention of food revitalized them. The two classes collaborated to prepare enough curry for everyone, and despite the day's challenges, they found joy in working together to create a delicious meal, unaware that this joy would not last the entire week. As both classes enjoyed the curry they had cooked, Izuku noticed 𝐼𝐼𝐻 scanning the area, seemingly searching for someone. When he approached her, she revealed that she hadn't seen 𝐾𝐻𝐬 in an hour and that he hadn't eaten yet. Izuku recalled seeing 𝐾𝐻𝐬 walk into the forest during training and offered to bring him dinner. Grateful, 𝐼𝐼𝐻 handed him a plate of food, and Izuku smiled, knowing he could talk to the boy in private. Using his bird's eye view quirk at night was tricky due to limited visibility, but he was determined. He finally reached the cliff where 𝐾𝐻𝐬 often lingered. Upon greeting the boy, Izuku informed him that 𝐼𝐼𝐻 had sent him with food. 𝐾𝐻𝐬 snapped back, questioning how Izuku knew where to find him. Izuku joked about using his tracking quirk and asked if he could sit with him. 𝐾𝐻𝐬 refused, insisting he didn't want food from someone who aspired to be a hero. Izuku looked at 𝐾𝐻𝐬 with concern as the boy voiced his thoughts about the dangers of heroism, expressing that heroes often ended up hurt or sad. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle, which annoyed 𝐾𝐻𝐬 further. He explained that 𝐾𝐻𝐬 reminded him of two important people in his life. Sitting at the edge of the cliff, he admired the appealing night sky, prompting 𝐾𝐻𝐬 to look up as well. Izuku shared that he was expected to be as powerful as All Might, catching 𝐾𝐻𝐬's attention. He spoke with pride about his quirk, mentioning that his father believed he could one day surpass the #1 hero. However, his expression shifted to sadness as he thought of his brother, who was quirkless. Despite his own power, Izuku felt disappointment for not being able to share it with his brother. He turned to 𝐾𝐻𝐬, explaining that his dad and brother were the two people he had thought of when he saw him. They both despised heroes like Izuku because his brother was born quirkless in a world full of quirks, and heroes constantly reminded them of that. Izuku wanted to be a beacon of hope for those who faced similar struggles as his brother, aspiring to be a hero like All Might. He explained this to 𝐾𝐻𝐬 with a warm smile, but 𝐾𝐻𝐬 continued to glare at him, unimpressed. Izuku felt taken aback by the child's response, which was blunt and dismissive. He stammered an apology, feeling embarrassed, and decided to leave, flustered by the unexpected reaction. 𝐾𝐻𝐬 simply glared at him as he walked away, muttering under his breath. It was now the third day of camp, and both classes were having breakfast before another day of rigorous training. 5 students were visibly struggling to keep their heads up, including the 4 who had failed from Class A and Nito, the only one from Class B. 𝐼𝐻𝐬's voice cut through the air, making them flinch. He expected none of them to rest that morning, regardless of how tired they felt. The 5 students responded in unison, secretly wishing they were anywhere else. While sitting with Izuku, Shuto, and 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿, Tenya noticed that Izuku had barely touched his food and seemed lost in thought. He called out to Izuku, urging him to eat, reminding him of the demanding day ahead. Izuku chuckled lightly, but his friends were concerned about his blank stare since the previous night. Shuto asked if something was wrong, and 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿 quickly defended himself, insisting he hadn't used his quirk on Izuku. Shuto shot him a look, silently warning him to behave. Their banter made Izuku laugh, but his mind drifted back to his earlier thoughts. When Shuto pressed him for an explanation, Izuku hesitated before admitting he had tried talking to 𝐾𝐻𝐬 the night before. He expressed his frustration about 𝐾𝐻𝐬's hatred for heroes, reflecting on how he had seen similar feelings grow in his own brother over the years. He didn't want to witness that kind of hatred again. 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿, feeling the weight of Izuku's words, looked away and continued eating. Tenya inquired if Izuku's conversation had any effect, to which Izuku nodded, feeling defeated. Shuto suggested that 𝐾𝐻𝐬 likely viewed Izuku as just a stranger, making it hard for him to accept his words. Izuku argued that he and 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿 had been strangers before, yet 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿 had believed in him. 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿 countered that Izuku had spoken to him directly, showing sincerity despite his fear. He noted that there had been no fear in Izuku's voice, which made Izuku smile, glad that his words had reached 𝗀𝐻𝐻𝐿. Shuto then recalled how Izuku had intervened during the sports festival and when he faced Stain, drawing amused reactions from the others. Tenya clarified that it meant Izuku had a tendency to meddle in situations. Izuku chuckled, admitting he couldn't help it, as it was a trait associated with heroes. 𝗟𝐿 almost choked on his food, but he managed to recover, assuring Izuku he was fine, even as memories of a past threat haunted him. He felt the phantom of hands around his neck again, urging himself to stay quiet. As they stood a few meters apart, Izuku and 𝗟𝐿 reflected on their similar circumstances. Aizawa informed them that 𝗟𝐿's combat skills were only slightly below Izuku's, but his training had narrowed the gap. He warned Izuku not to go easy on 𝗟𝐿, threatening consequences if he did. The plan was to avoid using their quirks, and as the match began, 𝗟𝐿 charged at Izuku, throwing punches that were easily deflected. Frustration bubbled within 𝗟𝐿 as he struggled to land a hit. Then Izuku sent a high kick towards the 𝗟𝗶𝗸, which the latter narrowly avoided by stepping back. The ● followed up with another attack, spinning his body and bringing his other foot down for another kick. 𝗟𝐿 crossed his arms to brace against the powerful strike. Although Izuku was shorter, he was more well-built and heavier, making it hard for 𝗟𝐿 to push him back. He couldn't use his feet to sweep the ●'s other leg off the ground since they were the ones supporting him at that moment. With no other option, 𝗟𝐿 decided to retreat for a while and create some distance between them. The two glared at each other during this brief pause, wiping the sweat from their brows. 𝗟𝐿 thought about how he had underestimated his opponent. The only difference between Izuku and Aizawa was that Izuku was actually engaging him in combat instead of evading and then delivering a finishing move. Suddenly, Izuku charged at him, launching a series of kicks that forced 𝗟𝐿 to move back repeatedly to dodge the attacks. 𝗟𝐿 noted that Izuku's fighting style was vastly different from when he used his quirk. Instead of throwing punches, he smoothly deflected 𝗟𝐿's attacks with his hands, using kicks as his main offensive moves. It was likely that he relied on his legs for their greater reach, compensating for the distance he usually covered with his quirk. 𝗟𝐿 found this strategy ingenious. If someone were unaware of it, they would be taken by surprise. He recalled a warning about keeping certain information under wraps, which momentarily distracted him. This lapse in focus allowed one of Izuku's kicks to connect with his face, sending him flying. Izuku rushed toward his friend with concern. 𝗟𝐿 reflected on how surprising it would be for anyone to learn that someone aspiring to be a hero like Izuku was related to villains. He wiped the BLD from his nose, realizing the irony of their situations. 𝗟𝐿 acknowledged that it worked both ways. If someone had no idea that All for One's youngest was attending UA, they would be shocked to learn of his existence. Izuku helped 𝗟𝐿 to his feet, expressing his concern. 𝗟𝐿 admitted that he had lost focus, and though it hurt, he understood the nature of their training. Aizawa's serious tone cut through the moment, instructing them to return to their starting positions. He warned them that there would be no breaks just because one of them got hurt. The two boys responded with varying levels of enthusiasm before Izuku moved a few meters away. 𝗟𝐿 felt the weight of Tamura's instructions in his mind, reminding him to keep the transmitter hidden. He touched the button-like device tucked inside his collar, recalling that he needed to stick the other one on Katsuki Bakugo that night. As he whispered to himself, he couldn't help but wonder why they wanted Bakugo and what they needed from him. He was almost certain that, like during the USJ incident, he was helping the League of Villains orchestrate another event at UA. Later, Pixie Bob's voice captured the attention of the students as they cleaned up after dinner. She excitedly proposed a game, and the mostly positive responses from her classmates made her smile wider. She announced that it would be a test of courage, with Class A versus Class B. Both classes would take turns being the 𝗟𝗍𝐼𝐻 and the 𝗟𝗍𝐼𝐻. Ragdoll would be waiting at the far end of the scaring route, holding cards that the students needed to retrieve to prove they had gone through the forest, ensuring no one could cheat. Pixie Bob's enthusiasm was contagious, but it quickly faded when she noticed the lack of excitement from her peers. Then, a mischievous idea struck her. The class that scared the most students would win, while the losers would have to join the failed students in extra lessons for the rest of the camp. The punishment perked the students up, especially when Nito Monoma, in his usual flamboyant manner, boasted about scaring Class A. However, he was abruptly silenced when Aizawa bound him with capture cloth, preventing him from finishing his speech. Aizawa reminded him that he had extra lessons to attend, leaving Monoma wide-eyed and realizing he would miss out on the game. The sight of his muffled protests made everyone laugh. 𝐼𝐻 then announced that Class B would be the scarers first, instructing them to head into the forest. As the Class B students walked away, 𝗀𝐻𝐸 scanned the area for the explosive blonde. When he finally spotted 𝗂𝐵𝐸𝐽, he clenched the transmitter in his pocket and approached him, trying to blend in with the other students who were also searching for their partners. When 𝐼𝐻𝐸 announced 𝗂𝐵𝐸𝐽's pairing with 𝗀𝗃, Katsuki looked over at 𝗀𝐻𝐸 and started walking toward him, causing 𝗀𝐻𝐸 to flinch. He wondered if 𝗂𝐵𝐸𝐽 had noticed him, but he quickly dismissed the thought. He probably saw 𝗀𝗃 behind him. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 needed to keep walking. He calmed himself down and continued toward the blonde. When they were finally near each other, 𝗀𝐻𝐸 intentionally bumped into the blonde and discreetly attached the transmitter to his shirt. He offered a casual apology to mask his true intent. The blonde responded calmly, assuring him it was okay. 𝐼𝐻𝐸 then called out the pairings, and when she mentioned Midoriya, 𝗀𝐻𝐸 flinched, thinking she referred to the older brother. However, relief washed over him when he heard, paired with Hitoshi. He quickly checked to ensure his transmitter was still on him, and it was. 𝐼𝐻𝐸 concluded with Todoroki paired with Yaoyorozu, prompting 𝗀𝐻𝐸 to scan the area for Izuku. As he walked past his classmates, he silently apologized to them. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 greeted his friend, expressing that they were partners again. Izuku laughed, noting that he didn't have to beg this time. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 chuckled but soon sighed, looking up at the sky. Izuku noticed and followed suit, commenting on the beauty of the scene. He remarked that they were looking at the past, a time before Quirks existed, when everything seemed calm and serene. His words made 𝗀𝐻𝐸 wince and look away, feeling a pang of guilt. 𝐼𝐻𝐸 announced the next pair to enter the forest, Midoriya and Hitoshi. A few minutes into the forest, the pair had yet to encounter any of Class 1B. Izuku wondered if they were just deeper in. As they walked, the silence grew dull, with only the sound of cicadas breaking it. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 stole a glance at Izuku, and a question popped into his head to pass the time. He asked why Izuku wanted to become a hero. Izuku looked at him, seeking clarification. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 elaborated, asking what had solidified his longing to be a hero. Izuku shared that he wanted to be a light for people, like All Might, a pillar of society. However, sensing that his friends sought a deeper answer, he continued, revealing that his determination was strengthened when his father had disappeared for a year due to family business troubles. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 was taken aback, surprised by this revelation. Izuku explained how they had thought his father was dead during that time, and although he eventually returned, it was never the same as having him home. The emotional weight of his words hung in the air as he expressed the pain of being separated from loved ones. He shared his longing to become a hero to ensure that no one else would have to endure such sadness. 𝗀𝐻𝐸, moved by Izuku's story, instinctively pulled him into a comforting hug. Izuku was initially surprised but welcomed the gesture, needing the support. As he let his emotions flow, tears streamed down his face. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 rubbed his back gently, allowing him to release the pent-up sadness. After a few moments, Izuku calmed down, thanking 𝗀𝐻𝐸 as he wiped his tears away. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 smiled and then thought of another question, one he hoped wouldn't evoke the same emotional response. He asked what Izuku might be doing if he hadn't planned on becoming a hero. Izuku chuckled, suggesting he would probably end up working in the family business. 𝗀𝐻𝐸's eyes widened in surprise, and he grabbed Izuku's shoulders, asking seriously if he even knew what his family did. However, he quickly let go, averting his gaze. The sudden shift in 𝗀𝐻𝐸's demeanor puzzled Izuku, but before he could inquire further, they noticed smoke rising from deeper within the forest. 𝐼𝐻𝐸's voice echoed through the area, announcing that they were under attack and instructing everyone to return to the campsite. Izuku turned to 𝗀𝐻𝐸, who nodded in acknowledgement. Then Izuku heard another message directed specifically at him, urging Kota to return to the campsite for safety. Checking to see if 𝗀𝐻𝐸 was distracted, Izuku activated his bird's eye view quirk. His heart raced as he spotted Kota on the same cliff where they had previously spoken. His eyes widened in alarm when he noticed a cloaked figure emerging from behind the rocks, approaching the young boy. 𝗀𝐻𝐸's urgent voice broke through his thoughts, urging him to leave. But Izuku felt a strong sense of responsibility for Kota, insisting that he needed to check on him first. He reassured 𝗀𝐻𝐸 that he would follow back to the campsite after ensuring 𝗀𝐻𝐬's safety. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 reluctantly agreed, telling Izuku to stay safe before running back. Once 𝗀𝐻𝐸 was a good distance away, Izuku activated Power Limb on his feet and headed toward 𝗀𝐻𝐬's location, unaware of the confrontation that awaited him. Izuku felt a surge of determination as he raced toward the cliff, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to reach 𝗀𝐻𝐸 in time. Suddenly he saw the villain remove his cloak and mask, and recognition hit him like a bolt of lightning. This was the one who had harmed 𝗀𝐻𝐸's family. Frustration coursed through him. He knew he wouldn't make it there quickly enough. With a fierce shout he activated his quirk, 𝗟𝗶𝐸𝐻𝐸. In an instant, a perfect clone of himself appeared beside him. They both paused, strategizing their next move. The clone began to enhance its strength, activating various muscle-augmenting quirks. With a powerful grip, it lifted the original Izuku and hurled him toward the cliff with incredible force. In mere moments, Izuku found himself soaring through the air, the cliff and the villain coming into view. He focused, channeling 50% of Power Limb into his arm, preparing for the strike. He was determined to protect 𝗀𝐻𝐸. Meanwhile, at the League of Villains hideout, 𝗂𝐻𝐽 observed as Tenko, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝐻𝐷's eldest child, entered with a peculiar smile. He took his usual seat, and 𝗂𝐻𝐽 poured a drink, intrigued by Tenko's demeanor. 𝗂𝐻𝐽 inquired about Tenko's mood, noting the potential danger to his younger brother. Tenko merely chuckled, revealing that a recent video might actually serve as a safeguard for Izuku. He explained that many who had seen the video idolized 𝗟𝗓, respecting his words and intentions. 𝗂𝐻𝐽's curiosity deepened, prompting him to ask for clarification. Tenko elaborated, expressing confidence that no harm would come to his brother, and he saw a chance to help him escape from UA. However, 𝗂𝐽 raised a concern, reminding Tenko of past incidents where Izuku had been involved despite his assurances. The playful banter between them continued, with Tenko expressing his frustration but also his unwavering belief in his brother's safety. Back at the cliff, Izuku took deep breaths as the dust settled around him. He wrapped his left arm protectively around 𝗀𝐻𝐸, who was trembling with fear. Izuku's right arm shook violently, a reminder of the power he had just unleashed. Despite the pain, he reassured 𝗀𝐻𝐸, determined to get him back to safety. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the air, taunting them. Izuku's heart raced as he activated every hardening quirk he could muster, but it wasn't enough. They were sent flying toward the mountain, and Izuku instinctively shielded 𝗀𝐻𝐸 with his body. The impact was jarring, and he felt a sharp pain in his left arm. 𝗀𝐻𝐸 cried out in distress, his fear palpable. Izuku fought to maintain his composure, assuring the boy that he would protect him. But as the villain revealed himself, a menacing smile spreading across his face, Izuku's resolve only strengthened. He would not let this enemy harm 𝗀𝐻𝐸. The villain acknowledged Izuku's earlier attack, a twisted grin forming on his face. He proposed a challenge, and Izuku knew he had to stand firm. He couldn't let fear take over. He had to fight for 𝗀𝐻𝐸's safety. All Izuku could do was buy enough time to, before he could finish that thought, the villain launched a punch toward the two boys. Izuku barely managed to evade, putting more distance between them. The villain, with a menacingly enthusiastic tone, remarked on their shared quirk. Izuku whispered to 𝗀𝐻𝐸 that he was going to buy time for him to escape and instructed him to run when he said so. 𝗀𝐻𝐸's eyes widened with concern, questioning how Izuku planned to defeat the villain. Izuku cursed inwardly, realizing that he had no chance in his current state. He forced a smile and reassured 𝗀𝐻𝐸 that he was as powerful as All Might. The villain interrupted, revealing that Tamura had ordered them not to harm 𝗀𝐻𝐸, but he found that amusing and declared he would not follow that order now that he knew they were similar. Izuku snapped back, asserting that he would never use his power for wrongdoing and that he was determined to be a hero. The villain laughed at his declaration, claiming that in this world, the winners are right and the losers are wrong. He continued, explaining that he joined the League of Villains not to follow anyone but to fight, challenging Izuku to give him his best shot. Izuku pushed 𝗀𝐻𝐸 away and activated 50% of his Power Limb combo on his right arm, which was already aching. He charged toward the villain, delivering a powerful blow that shattered the cliff behind him. Izuku pulled back for another strike, though it was weaker due to the pain. He grimaced, realizing that he was reaching his limits. He activated his quirks in preparation for the villain's counterattack. The villain, excited by Izuku's efforts, prepared to retaliate. Izuku braced himself, feeling the impact of the villain's attack. He was flung back against the mountain, coughing as he struggled to catch his breath. His arms were broken, and the pain was overwhelming. He thought of Koda, hoping he had managed to escape. Suddenly, he heard Koda's warning just in time to activate his defensive quirks. The villain taunted him, reveling in the struggle and boasting about the difficulty he faced in pushing the attack onto Izuku. The villain announced his intention to enjoy defeating Izuku, preparing for another strike. But then, a splash of water and a cry from Koda interrupted him. Koda, tears streaming down his face, confronted the villain about his parents, who had fought bravely but had perished. The villain laughed, recalling their struggle, and threatened Koda next. As the villain's words echoed in Izuku's mind, he remembered his purpose: to protect those he loved and ensure no one else suffered loss. Suddenly, a yellow gem-shaped barrier appeared around Koda, catching the villain off guard. Lightning struck down from above, incapacitating the villain and drawing the attention of everyone nearby. A massive wave of water and molten lava surged toward him, solidifying into ice and rock, trapping the villain. The villain cried out in confusion, but his eyes widened as he saw Izuku stand up, surrounded by black lightning with a green glow. Izuku explained his quirks: lightning strike, water 𝐒𝐮𝐬, and lava flow, which allowed him to control elements with devastating effect. The villain felt a surge of fear as he met Izuku's determined gaze, sensing a powerful malice. Izuku gritted his teeth, his voice cracking as he confronted the villain. He charged forward, his right arm swelling and twisting as he activated Power Limb beyond full power. With a powerful punch, Izuku struck the villain at point-blank range, breaking the ice and rocks that bound him and sending shockwaves through the mountain. The sound of bones breaking echoed as Izuku's determination shattered the villain's defenses. Koda watched in horror and awe as Izuku's arms returned to normal, though still twisted from the effort. He couldn't understand why Izuku would risk everything for him. He asked himself why. The little boy's eyes widened as he recalled a memory of his parents that he had almost forgotten. They had explained that they risked their lives to save others because, in a world full of uncertainty, people need someone they can rely on to help them through difficult times. He thought about how, if he could be a light for those who were going through what his brother had experienced, he would be a hero for them, just like All Might. That was why he wanted to be a hero. He felt a wave of gratitude for his parents and Izuku as tears continued to flow down his cheeks.